Chapter 1065.
What's going on?
Hurry up and calm them down. The Gaoyue tribe had mastered powerful beast-taming techniques. The dire beasts were as obedient as kittens in front of them, and they rarely lost control. The beast masters obeyed their orders and tried to calm the agitated dire beasts down, but it was the opposite of what they wanted. Not only did it not work, but it also made the dire beasts even more agitated, and their eyes shone with a blood-red light. Useless. All of you are useless. The Gaoyue tribe's leader, who was sitting on the elephant's back, grabbed the fence with both hands. His rough face was a little pale, and he didn't look as proud as before. He even scolded, "Hurry up and control them." The dire beasts were so agitated that their usual commands didn't work anymore. The beastmasters could only use whips to intimidate them. However, after a few whips, the dire beasts were completely enraged. A tiger with a green and white forehead roared and pounced on the beastmaster, riding on the dire beast's back with its mouth wide open. The beastmaster didn't expect to be pounced on by a docile pet. Before he fell to the ground, he had a look of disbelief on his face. Before he could struggle, the big tiger with a pale forehead had already opened its mouth and bit down on his neck. Its heavy breathing hit his skin, and its sharp teeth sank into his fragile flesh. With just a little bit of force, the beastmaster heard the sound of his neck bones cracking before he lost consciousness. The smell of blood spread, completely triggering the dire beast's bloodthirst. As the beastmaster was bitten to death by the tiger, the other dire beasts pounced on the other beastmasters. The originally orderly army of beasts was now in chaos. Cries of pain came from the dire beasts' mouths. Before they could call for help, the usually docile dire beasts had already taken their lives. They bit, gnawed, or used their sharp claws to dismember the dire beasts' corpses. The viewers in the live stream watched with their mouths agape. The bullet comments on the screen didn't update for a long time. The silly and adorable giant pandas in their memories were now moving with strength that didn't match their clumsy bodies. The front paws that were usually used to hug bamboo had now become weapons for killing dire beasts. The seemingly gentle and harmless paws directly caved in the dire beast's head. The audience also knew that the giant panda's molars were very developed, and could even be considered the strongest among carnivores. However, their impression of how strong it was still stuck at the stage where it was gnawing on bamboo. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he could even chew a person's femur into pieces in 2 or 3 bites. On the battlefield, over 1,000 black and white balls surrounded the Gaoyue race army from all directions. Their originally adorable round faces were now filled with terrifying ferocity. The audience watched in silence, while the Gaoyue people, who were surrounded by the pandas and other ferocious beasts, were panicking. The great beasts were the trump card of the Haiyu race. Controlling the great beasts to kill their enemies was their specialty, but the Haiyu race themselves were not very powerful. They were too confident. They never thought that the beasts would break free from their control and help the enemy attack them. Don't come over. The ferocious beasts went berserk, and the Haiyu clan's beast familiars were scared out of their wits. The ferocious beasts that they had once completely tamed had now become the most terrifying black and white impermanents. Because of the intense fear, his eyes were wide open, and his eyes were filled with tears and blood vessels. The beast familiars tried to use whips, knives, spears, swords, and halberds to fend off the beast familiars, but it was to no avail. Even if they managed to repel 1 or 2, there would still be countless hungry ferocious beasts chasing after them, pouncing on them with their bloody mouths wide open. The seemingly adorable iron-eating beasts, the pandas, were demonstrating to the audience what it meant to never judge a bear by its appearance. They ran and chased after the beast familiars, the fat on their bodies rippling with cute curves as they moved. However, no one was able to appreciate this beauty at the moment. That was because once they were knocked down by a bear, their weight would be as heavy as Mount Tai, and the other black and white balls would follow up with another slash. Although the Haiyu race was an enemy, witnessing them being surrounded by the ferocious beasts and dying without a complete corpse left everyone feeling very conflicted. The ferocious beasts went berserk, and the canopy on the elephants' backs was flung off. The Haiyu race's leader and elders, who were sitting in the canopy, fell to the ground and were half dead. Before they could get up, the ferocious beasts, who had lost control of their emotions, pounced on them one after another, their sharp claws and teeth raining down on them. In just a few breaths, all that was left on the ground were the mangled corpses riddled with wounds. Their flesh was turned inside out, and blood was gushing out. Before they died, their eyes were still wide open. As their breathing stopped, The strong desire to live in their eyes gradually extinguished. Only a horrifying fear remained on their faces. Jiang Pengji, who was the mastermind behind all this, was still playing the jade flute. She didn't know how to play the flute in the first place. Although her posture was pretty, as if she was about to ascend to heaven, she was actually just playing the flute blindly. Feng Jin and the others didn't know the inside story and thought that she was really using the sound of the flute to control the ferocious beasts. In order not to disturb her, they tolerated the terrible sound of the flute. Wei Ci, who vaguely knew the inside story, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He saw through it but didn't say anything, continuing to pretend that nothing had happened. This battle. I'm afraid it's the easiest and most unforgettable battle I've ever fought in my life. Meng Hun muttered softly. Meng Hun murmured as he stared at the enemy without blinking, fearing that there would be an accident. Reality proved that his worries were unfounded. The ferocious beasts only cared about ravaging the Haiyu race, using brute force to grind them against the ground. Why would they have the time to care about them? Wouldn't it be wonderful if fighting battles were this easy in the future? Feng Zhen sighed with emotion. Their tens of thousands of troops got into battle formation. Banners fluttered in the wind, and drums beat. Everyone was in high spirits. They wanted nothing more than to skewer the Haiyu race like mutton. But what happened in the end? From the beginning of the battle to the end, they didn't even fire an arrow, let alone kill a single enemy. They watched as their lord played the flute, endured the piercing sound, and watched as the Haiyu race suffered the consequences of their actions. No one would believe it if they told others. If fighting battles were this easy, Feng Zhen would be willing to listen to this flute sound for the rest of his life. As soon as Feng Zhen finished speaking, the shrill and noisy flute sound stopped abruptly. As the sound of the flute disappeared, Jiang Pengji's brows furrowed. Her cheeks, which had been rosy before, instantly turned pale. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead. My lord. Wei Ci was the closest. He leaped forward on his horse and supported Jiang Pengji's slightly swaying body. Her right hand gripped the jade flute tightly, and the fingers of her left hand pressed against her sweaty forehead. A fierce murderous intent flashed across her pitch-black eyes. I'm fine. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath. Her tightly pursed lips curled into a faint smile. Her pale cheeks instantly became lively again. She said to Wei Ci, I had too much fun just now. I almost forgot my limits. Don't worry. I'm in good condition. I'll be fine after a short rest. A hint of understanding flashed across Wei Ci's eyes. The Haiyu race had to expend a lot of energy to control hundreds of beasts to defend against the enemy. His lord had done it all at once. She must have been burdened. There is a limit to one's strength. My lord, please put your health first. If the lord takes care of everything, wouldn't it mean that we are incompetent? Feng Jin and the others had similar thoughts as Wei Ci. Unbeknownst to them, Jiang Pengji had suddenly stopped not because she didn't have the strength to continue fighting, but because the subsystems had joined forces to attack and attempt to escape from the prison. Chapter 1066. Jiang Pengji's body was in trouble, so no one dared to let her continue taking risks. Anyway, the Gaoyue tribe and the beasts they tamed had killed each other. The Gaoyue tribe was almost completely wiped out, so there was nothing to fear. As for the latter, Meng Hun was about to order the army to be on guard against the beasts' counterattack, but Jiang Pengji dispelled his worries. If you don't harm them, they won't harm a single soldier of our army. Meng Hun's eyes flashed with joy. If that was the case, the last bit of worry he had was gone. Just as Jiang Pengji had said, the beasts that had been bloodthirsty not long ago were now well behaved. Some were lying on the ground, some were standing, some were yawning, and some were wagging their tails. They didn't seem threatening at all. Even so, the group didn't let down their guard, nor did they think that they were cute. After all, the remains of the Gaoyue tribe were still warm. With the Gaoyue tribe as an example, the group had a clearer understanding and fear of these ferocious beasts. What do you plan to do with them, my lord? Feng Zhen looked at the beasts, his eyes burning with passion. If they could use the Gaoyue tribe's army of beasts, it would be a great help. Jiang Pengji pondered for a moment and said plainly, separate them into different categories and release them. Release them? The answer was unexpected. Not only were Feng Zhen and the others surprised, but the live stream viewers were also stunned. Apart from the Gaoyue tribe, only Jiang Pengji could easily control the army of beasts. She didn't want to eat the fat meat that was already in her mouth, but she was going to throw it away? The army of beasts was not easy to deal with because they had met Jiang Pengji, their natural enemy. If it weren't for Jiang Pengji but someone else, the army of beasts would have long since beaten them up under the command of the Gaoyue tribe. My lord, isn't it a pity to do this? Meng Hun asked hesitantly. Releasing the beasts that the Gaoyue tribe had trained for many years into the forest was such a bold move. It was too wasteful. Having seen the fighting power of the beasts, Meng Hun was envious. Jiang Pengji lifted her eyelids in annoyance and asked a question that made people speechless. She asked, "Let's not talk about the elephants. Have you ever thought about how many chickens, ducks, fish, and geese the ordinary jackals, wolves, tigers and leopards eat every day? If you can afford it, you can keep them." The Gaoyue tribe could afford it because they lived in a fixed place for generations and raised a large number of domestic animals. If the budget was not enough, the Meng family would have to pay for the Gaoyue clan. Jiang Pengji fought in the war all year round and was never at home. The mobility of the army camp was too high. If he were to raise an army of beasts, the food that the beasts needed would definitely have to be transferred from elsewhere. Was that even possible? Jiang Pengji vigorously carried out the policy of farming, which solved the problem of food shortage during the war. Although there was an abundance of rations, it was only enough for tens of thousands of soldiers to eat their fill. Most of the time they were vegetarian, and they could only drink meat soup a few times every 10 days to half a month. Humans were already living such a hard life. How could they allocate chickens, ducks, fish, and geese to these wild beasts so that they could maintain their combat strength? It was a simple question, but it stumped everyone. Meng Hun pondered for a moment and knew that his idea wouldn't work. Raise? They definitely couldn't afford it. Release him? Meng Hun felt his heart ache. It was better to keep all of them. Their fur could be used to make winter clothes. It was better than returning empty-handed. An intact beast's fur was also a very precious treasure. My lord, releasing the dragon into the sea and the tiger back into the mountains will definitely leave behind future troubles. It's hard to guarantee that no ordinary people will be hurt by them in the future. Jiang Pengji could tell what Meng Hun was thinking, but she didn't reprimand him. The people of ancient times didn't have the consciousness to protect animals. Because in the eyes of the people, wild beasts were enemies who competed with them for living space. Almost everywhere, wild beasts had killed people. When ordinary people encountered ferocious beasts, they basically had no ability to resist. Releasing these wild beasts back into the mountains would indeed leave behind hidden dangers for the people. I'll give them an order to avoid strangers and go to the remote mountains and forests to live. Jiang Pengji understood, but she didn't want to do that. They belonged to the mountains and forests. If the Gaoyue people hadn't captured and imprisoned them, they would have been free. Most of the beasts were caught locally, but some were smuggled over from faraway places. Jiang Pengji made the decision to release most of them into the deep mountains and forests. She gave them an order, while the rest were left in the Gaoyue people's territory to raise and find a suitable environment for them to live in. The elites of the Gaoyue people were all annihilated. The defense of Luofeng Dock was useless. How could they resist Jiang Pengji's ferocious army? The army advanced triumphantly at the fastest speed. Using Luofeng Dock as a foothold, they outflanked the other two districts in Qianyan County. She was like a hot knife through butter. The Gaoyue people, whom Meng Zhan had high hopes for, couldn't stop her. As the front line lost again and again, urgent secret reports were sent to Meng County. The war was getting worse. Meng County was in a state of panic. Meng Zhan couldn't sleep for a few nights. Useless. Meng Zhan didn't expect the Gaoyue people to be so weak. They weren't fighting a war. They were sending their lives to the enemy. Although Meng Zhan was only using the Gaoyue people, he didn't expect them to lose so badly. The Mengs have raised them for almost 300 years, but in the end, they're useless. Meng Zhan was so angry that the blue veins on his forehead were visible. He hit the table with his fist, which made a dull sound. After a while, he took a deep breath to calm himself down. He asked, "Is there any news from Zhanjiang Gate and Yumen Gate?" The subordinate replied, "It hasn't arrived yet, but judging from the time, it should be coming soon." Hearing this, Meng Zhan's face turned a little better, but he couldn't stop cursing Lu Shi and Jiang Pengji in his heart. The former lived a leisurely life as a retired man. The latter went back to the two subsystems to settle the score. That day, Jiang Pengji controlled the beasts of the Gaoyue people to kill each other. She didn't expect the two subsystems to take advantage of the situation. The mental brain was the strongest and weakest part of a human being. Jiang Pengji used her strong mental strength to imprison the two subsystems there for a few years. During that time, the two subsystems behaved themselves. If it wasn't for the two light cocoons in her mental brain, she would have forgotten about their existence. To control the beasts of the Gaoyue people, Jiang Pengji diverted some of her mental strength. This created an illusion for the two subsystems that her mental strength was weak. It was a good opportunity for them to break out of the prison. The two subsystems planned to use all their strength to do something. As long as they broke out of the mental cage, Jiang Pengji's brain would be severely damaged. When that happened, not only would they be able to get away with it, but they could also find another host to infect. They could also help the main system to severely injure Jiang Pengji. Without special methods, the recovery of mental injuries would be extremely slow. As long as the main system's mental strength was higher than Jiang Pengji's, the scales of victory would be in their favor. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji was more cunning than they thought. Chapter 1067. Jiang Pengji didn't settle the score with the two subsystems immediately, but it didn't mean that she had forgotten about it. She only had time to manage the systems after she finished what she was doing and led the army to gain a foothold in Songzhou. After all, they were friends who had been intimate with each other for several years. The two subsystems understood Jiang Pengji's temper too well. This woman's heart was even narrower than the tip of a needle. Whoever provoked her would suffer 800 lifetimes of bad luck. They waited and waited. The expected score didn't come. The subsystems then understood the suffering of the death row prisoners. When they heard Jiang Pengji's voice in their mental brain, they didn't feel nervous or afraid. Instead, they felt relieved as if they had been released from prison. At the same time, a thought popped up in their minds. It's finally here. Jiang Pengji closed the streaming room and instructed the servants not to disturb her. She had always been straightforward when talking to the subsystems. She was too lazy to beat around the bush. You should know why I'm looking for you, right? Jiang Pengji asked straightforwardly. I haven't forgotten how you two took the opportunity to escape during the battle against the Gaoyue clan. If my mental brain wasn't strong enough to resist your schemes, what would have happened? This kind of mental attack from the inside out can cause serious damage to the mental brain, or even dementia or vegetative state. The two subsystems fell silent. To them, Jiang Pengji was the warden who imprisoned them, and they were prisoners under her custody. Was there anything wrong with prisoners escaping for freedom? If they successfully escaped, it was because they were capable. If they were caught by the warden, it was because the warden was capable. They could only blame themselves for not being as skilled as the others and being one step behind. After so much hard work, not only did they not obtain freedom, but they didn't even hurt Jiang Pengji. Instead, they lost their lives. The two subsystems were really unlucky to meet a host like Jiang Pengji. System number 1 had spent the most time with Jiang Pengji. It was also the most thick-skinned. It had the attitude of a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water. The winner is king, and the loser is the bandit. Our plan failed because we are not as good as you. We admit defeat. System number 1 said in a dry electronic voice, Jiang Pengji, you've locked us up for so many years. If you wanted to kill us, you would have done so long ago. You've kept us alive until now. You must be up to no good. But I have to warn you, if you don't kill him now, you might not have the chance in the future. Jiang Pengji was stunned. She smiled and said, Why do you say so? Could it be that your main system has already discovered your situation and is planning to save you? If that's the case, I'm actually quite happy. The main body of the system is still hidden, which is a hidden danger to me. Hidden dangers were like ticking time bombs. Don't try to trick us. Even if we die, we won't say a word about the main body. System number 1 sneered and said, Do you still remember the plane patrol merchant I mentioned to you when we attacked Xueqi County? He's here. Jiang Pengji's expression froze. Her eyes flickered as if she was trying to determine if system number 1 was telling the truth. He came. Jiang Pengji said, But I remember you said that it would take at least 10 years for him to arrive here? System number 1 said coldly, There are always surprises in everything. Plans can't keep up with changes. Logically speaking, it should take him another 10 years or so to find this plane. I don't know what went wrong, but but the time of arrival has been brought forward. Jiang Pengji, you're dead meat. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyelids and did not say a word. System number 1 was still chattering away. If you hadn't acted smart and chosen to cooperate with me back then, it would have been a win-win situation for us. How could our relationship have become like this today? System number 1 seemed to have vented its anger and said to Jiang Pengji, you don't belong to this world. You're a spiritual body that has entered this world illegally. You're an anomaly. To put it bluntly, you're a pathogen that brings disaster. The plane patrol merchant will not let you off. Speaking of this, system number 1 was also sneaky. You're not afraid of being caught by the plane patrol merchant, but we don't want to be locked up. Naturally, we want to escape. If Jiang Pengji was not so stubborn and full of ideas, they could have cooperated to escape the pursuit of the plane patrol merchant. Now, it wanted to see how Jiang Pengji would die. I've told you before that the plane patrol merchant can't do anything to me. At most, they'll be locked up for a few years before being released. They don't deserve death. You're different. You're just a spiritual body. You're nothing more than an ant. System number 1 seemed to want to vent all the grievances it had suffered over the past few years. It kept saying, I know you think that my method of deceiving the host is despicable, but didn't you say it yourself? It's fine as long as you're happy while you're alive. Who cares if there's a flood behind you when you die? After you die, your soul is used as a reward for a second use. What's this? If you can exchange your soul for a lifetime of glory and splendor, how many people would be willing to trade with me? Don't think too highly of yourself and put gold on your face all the time. System number 1 rattled on. System number 2 did not say a word as it watched its companion attack Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji listened attentively for a long time before asking system number 1. If time could be reversed, Jiang Pengji let out a long sigh, as if there was infinite regret in her chest. But she did not wait for system number 1 to be complacent. She suddenly changed the topic. I'll still lock you up. Working with a guy like you? You really think highly of yourself. System number 1 was exasperated. You're about to die, but you're still so stubborn. Jiang Pengji said, don't I still have you guys? Not only will the dimensional merchant capture me, but he'll also capture your real bodies. This business is not a loss. Before I die, I'll definitely drag you guys down with me. Without you guys stirring up trouble, the world will be much more peaceful. After some conversation, Jiang Pengji and the system parted on bad terms once again. Jiang Pengji looked at the moonlight outside the window, which was as clear as water. In a trance, she thought of a certain person who was like the bright moon in her arms. Since the dimensional merchant had come, wouldn't it be a pity that she had not cooked the frog? If she kept it and did not eat it, who knew which fairy would benefit from it? Thinking of this, Jiang Pengji grabbed a black cloak and hurriedly covered herself with it. She nimbly climbed out of the window. At this time, Xueqi had just finished washing up. With his damp black hair, he sat upright at the table and was carefully drawing something. Suddenly, he heard some movement outside the courtyard. Zixiao. Jiang Pengji leaned against the window and waved at him. Fortunately, Xueqi was mentally strong, so he was not frightened by Jiang Pengji. He got up and walked to the window. He opened it for Jiang Pengji and let her climb in. Before closing the window, he carefully looked around. If someone saw his lord climbing through his window in the middle of the night, their relationship would not be clean even if they jumped into the Milky Way. My lord, if you have something to look for me, you can just send someone to summon me. Why did you come here alone? Xueqi closed the window. As soon as he turned around, he was hugged by Jiang Pengji. She forcefully trapped him in front of the window. In the next second, he felt her warmth on his lips. What was going on? Xueqi widened his eyes in shock. He resisted the physical reaction and raised his hand to push her away. My lord. Chapter 1068. Although their relationship had been tacitly acknowledged, they usually communicated with their eyes at most. Touching one's small hand was considered intimate, let alone kissing. Of course I'm happy, but... Before Xueqi could finish speaking, his lord leaned forward again. Xueqi did not dare to struggle vigorously. The two of them fell to the ground from the window, which happened to be where the shadow was the heaviest. He could only see her silhouette with his eyes wide open, but he could not see her expression. He could only see the soft light reflected in her bright eyes. My lord? Wei Si's breathing was slightly heavy. His hands were placed by his side. After a while, he put them on Jiang Pengji's waist. As he spoke, his lapel loosened, revealing a small part of his chest and delicate collarbone. Jiang Pengji nibbled twice and smacked her lips as if she was savoring the aftertaste. The taste is not bad. Why did I agree to the promise of waiting for 8 to 10 years? Jiang Pengji smiled delightedly. What Zhi always says makes sense. For the sake of having fun, one should do it in time. How can one wait? If there is fun, one should enjoy it. Why suffer? Wei Si was stunned. He intuitively felt that Jiang Pengji's state was not right, but he did not know what was wrong. Zhi, do you know that I probably don't have many days left to live? Jiang Pengji sighed. There was a smile in her words, so Wei Si thought Jiang Pengji was joking. As soon as he heard the word death, his expression suddenly darkened. My lord is blessed and blessed. You will be the ruler of the world in the future. How can you curse yourself like this? Jiang Pengji chuckled. She said, I love listening to Zhi speak. Wei Si's expression did not improve. Instead, he asked her, My lord, do you also think that I am just a vile person who flatters and fawns over you? Of course not. In that case, my lord should know that every word I say comes from the bottom of my heart. You should not simply listen to it as good words. Wei Si was a very serious person. Jiang Pengji really could not dissuade him in this aspect. My lord will definitely live to a ripe old age. In the future, you will have many children and grandchildren. Jiang Pengji blinked and said with a smile. In the future, you will have many children and grandchildren. Wei Si was stunned for a moment. After a while, he understood the ambiguity of her words. He was so angry that his face turned red. If his lord continued to be so perverted, how could he face the word F in the future? Everyone has their own ups and downs. If I tell you for sure that I won't be able to live to 100 years old, and I'll die soon, Jiang Pengji said with a smile. Without waiting for her to finish, Wei Si, who was trapped on the ground by her, suddenly moved. He turned around and pressed her under his body. The two of them were so close that their breaths were intertwined. Jiang Pengji did not have to look to know that Wei Si was angry. It's impossible for you to suddenly die. Jiang Pengji responded with a smile and said perfunctorily, Yes, yes, yes. It's impossible for him to die suddenly. At most, he will die young. Wei Si could not bear to listen to these words, especially when they were linked to Jiang Pengji. Who would curse themselves for having a short lifespan all day long? If all the deities and Buddhas in the sky really heard it and shortened her lifespan, wouldn't Wei Si go crazy? Zhi, I don't want to either. Jiang Pengji sighed and raised her hand to caress his back. The two of them changed from lying on top to lying on their sides. They faced each other and said, I don't believe in fate, but sometimes I have no choice but to believe it. If not for the fact that I have no other choice, I don't want to abandon the foundation that I've just started, let go of my ambition, and cruelly leave. A stolen life is really too short. Wei Si's expression changed. He clenched his slender fingers into a fist, his nails digging into his flesh. You're a smart person. Most likely you've already guessed that I'm not Lu Shi, Jiang Pengji said. My surname is Jiang, and my name is Pengji. I come from a very, very distant world. I stole this part of Lu Shi's life. Although it's not what I want, I can't do anything if others want to take it back. Wei Zhi, you said that I've coveted you for so many years, and you're very clear about it. Why won't you allow me? Wei Si listened to her in a daze, as if he was listening to a heavenly book. His lips moved, and he could not speak for a long time. A stolen life will definitely be taken back by the heavens? He came back to his senses. If that's the case, I may be able to accompany my lord for a while longer. Unfortunately, Wei Si was also a thief. Jiang Pengji knew the deeper meaning of his words. She smiled and leaned closer to him, kissing him on the lips. As expected, Zhi is still the most considerate. No matter how many years had passed, Wei Si still could not adapt to Jiang Pengji's enthusiasm. He scrupulously abided by his identity, and did not dare to overstep his boundaries and offend her in any situation. Even in such matters, he let her lead. Although Jiang Pengji did not have much actual combat experience, in the interstellar era, what could she not have? Her theoretical knowledge was very rich, and she was familiar with all kinds of difficult positions. Jiang Pengji saw that Wei Ci had tacitly agreed. Her right hand moved from his chest to his waist. After feeling around for a while, she started to untie the knot. His clothes were half undone. His eyes were drowsy, and the corners of his eyes seemed to be filled with moisture. While she was dawdling, Jiang Pengji's clothes loosened a little. Wei Ci could not suppress his emotions as he looked at her. Jiang Pengji was about to feel her hand down when the tip of her ear moved. There was a strange movement outside the door. She looked up abruptly, and coincidentally saw a tall black shadow flash past the door. Jiang Pengji's mind calmed down, and she quickly got up. She straightened her clothes and opened the door. Wei Ci seemed to have been splashed with a basin of water. The misty look in his eyes faded, and it was replaced by rationality and seriousness. "My lord." Wei Ci saw that Jiang Pengji maintained the posture of opening the door and did not move. He quickly took the lamp at the side to illuminate the room. He went forward to take a look. He saw a long black wooden box on the ground. The outside of the wooden box was carved with complicated auspicious clouds and dragon and phoenix patterns. In addition, there was a creature lying on top of the wooden box, moaning softly. Its soft and fat body was spread out like a meat patty. The creature seemed to have noticed them as well. It raised its head with difficulty, and its two black grape-like eyes stared straight at them. Jiang Pengji's face was a little gloomy. If the person had not deliberately made a sound, she would not have noticed that there was someone outside. "Bring them in," Jiang Pengji said gloomily. Wei Ci could only squat down. He scooped up the black and white meat patty with one hand and picked up the black wooden box with the other. He thought that the wooden box was very light, but the actual weight was far beyond his imagination. He could not carry it with one hand. Jiang Pengji saw the situation and reached out to help. She weighed it. She did not know what was inside, but it was close to 100 kilograms. Wei Ci found that there was a letter under the black and white meat patty. "Come in." Jiang Pengji's face was a little gloomy. No one would be in a good mood if their mood was interrupted by external objects. Wei Ci did not dare to directly pass the strange letter to Jiang Pengji. What if it was smeared with poison? Wei Ci was shocked when he opened it. The craftsmanship of this paper is really ingenious. It was as white as snow and as thin as silk. Even the best rice paper could not compare to 1/10,000th of it. Looking at the content, there were only 2 sentences. "It was created by your father. I present it to you." Chapter 1069. "This is emulation paper." Jiang Pengji glanced at him, and a hint of coldness flashed in her eyes, but she remained calm on the surface. "What's emulation paper?" Wei Ci held the piece of paper fondly. The texture of the paper made him sigh in his heart. Could such outstanding paper-making skills really be achieved by humans? "It's just an ordinary piece of paper." Jiang Pengji looked down and sneered. The smile on her face was full of mockery. "It's getting more and more interesting." Wei Ci did not understand what she meant. What did she mean by getting more and more interesting? Jiang Pengji had no intention of explaining. She placed the black wooden box on the table, her gaze solemn. Just as he was about to raise his hand to open it, Wei Ci hurriedly stopped him. "You can't, my lord. We don't know the origin of this item. If there's any sinister poison in it." He held the moaning black and white meatball in his right hand and stopped Jiang Pengji from courting death with his left hand. Jiang Pengji said, "Based on the skills of the person who came just now, if he really wanted to harm me, why would he need to play tricks inside?" Lu Shi's current body was too weak. If it was in the past, she would have the confidence to settle the score with the person who came. Wei Ci could not dissuade Jiang Pengji, so he could only watch her anxiously. If there was an accident, he would pounce over. "I can't open it. There's a problem with the box's lock." Jiang Pengji tried and found that there was a lock on the box. The design of the lock was very strange. She couldn't find the keyhole. "This lock seems to be made with a special mechanism technique. My lord won't be able to open it like this." Wei Ci took a closer look and very quickly discovered the mechanism inside. He took the initiative to volunteer. "My lord, why don't you let me try? Maybe I can open it." Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows slightly and took the initiative to make space for Wei Ci to open the lock. Wei Ci placed the black and white meatball on his lap. The little thing whimpered twice, as if it was very unwilling. Zhang Pengji heard the noise and took a glance. She saw that the little guy was also looking at her. His sparkling eyes were like a pair of black grapes that were full of vigor. They were so clean that one's reflection could be seen in them. While Wei Ci was focused on unlocking the door, she secretly reached out and took the meatball. The fur on the little guy's body hadn't grown for long. It was soft to the touch like cotton. Zhang Pengji couldn't help but caress it from the back of its white neck to its black shoulder strap, then to its plump and fleshy buttocks. She squeezed it with her fingers. The black and white meatball realized that it was in a different place and was being teased. It struggled to turn its head and stared blankly at Zhang Pengji. Wei Ci's fingers were very nimble, and he exclaimed as he unlocked the lock. The person who created this lock must be an expert in the art of mechanisms. If one didn't have a strong understanding of mechanisms, this lock couldn't be opened at all. He really didn't know who made it. Wei Ci tossed and turned for the time it took to burn a stick of incense. Zhang Pengji's expression gradually became impatient. These emotions were not directed at Wei Ci. You have the heart to give me something, but you set up a trap to make things difficult for me. I really don't know if you have good intentions or bad intentions. Zhang Pengji's tone was very unpleasant. Her furrowed brows left a few wrinkles between her eyebrows. If Zixiao is in trouble, why don't you smash it open with a pendulum? That way, you won't have to waste your energy. Is the Lord getting impatient? Wei Ci's laughter was mellow. If he couldn't open it, he would smash it open with an axe. Such violent actions had not changed at all. He said, the item in the box must be extraordinary to be able to use such an exquisite mechanism lock. My lord, please be patient. He raised his hand to wipe the thin layer of sweat on his forehead. After a long while, he finally opened it. He pressed something with his finger. After a clear click, the lid of the wooden box automatically popped open, revealing its true appearance. This isn't... Wei Ci saw the item in the long wooden box clearly. He was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue. Zhang Pengji raised her head when she heard him. She placed the black and white meatball on her lap and reached out to take out the item that lay quietly in the wooden box. It was a knife. The blade was narrow and straight, shiny like snow. It was covered with faint natural cloud patterns, giving off a rich and sharp aura for no reason. The handle of the knife was very long. The two ends were wide and the middle was slightly narrow. Even if the user held the knife with both hands, it wouldn't feel cramped. The blade and the handle were 3 feet and 3 inches long. The length was slightly longer than an ordinary sword. Do you recognize this knife? Zhang Pengji was right about Wei Ci's surprise. He had definitely seen it before and was very familiar with it. Wei Ci calmed himself down and deliberated on how to speak. This knife used to be Her Majesty's knife. It accompanied her on her expeditions for more than 10 years. Countless people were killed by the knife. She even used it to kill many traitors and enemies. Ever since I followed Her Majesty, this knife has never left her side. Later, on Chongqing's 18th birthday, Her Majesty gave this knife to Chongqing as a token of the crown prince. This was the first time Wei Ci talked about Her Majesty so frankly, and it was in front of Zhang Pengji. Chongqing? Sure enough. Zhang Pengji seemed to have figured something out. A faint smile appeared on her face. No wonder you like Feng Jin's child so much. If I'm not wrong, Fusho is also our future child. But this name has already been set. It can't be used anymore. Wei Ci blushed with embarrassment. That was not the main point. You said that this knife has appeared before? Zhang Pengji did not follow up with another attack. Instead, she changed the topic. This made Wei Ci heave a sigh of relief. If she continued to ask, Wei Ci felt that he would not be able to keep his mouth shut. Yes, but Her Majesty has never talked about its origin. Outsiders think that it was seized from the enemy, but I don't think so. He did not expect to have the opportunity to witness the answer to the unsolved mystery of his previous life. The knife that followed Her Majesty was not a spoil of war, nor was it a divine object from heaven. It was merely a gift from a mysterious person. Of course not. The material of this knife is not something that can be made with the current smelting technology, Zhang Pengji said calmly. Because Wei Ci and she had a common secret, she was not afraid that Wei Ci could not accept it. She was even less afraid that her words would scare him. Do you know? This knife was also extremely rare in my previous life. Only people above 1 trillion could have it. Xueqi opened his eyes slightly in shock. In both his previous and previous lives, this was the first time that he heard his lord take the initiative to talk about her past. My lord's previous life? It was a very beautiful but very cruel world. Xueqi had personally experienced death and rebirth, so he was also very receptive to strange and dazzling things. Because he had already guessed it, he was not surprised that Jiang Pengji took the initiative to admit it. Instead, he was very curious about what kind of world could cultivate a person like Jiang Pengji. As someone who was born to stand at the peak and look down on the masses, any slight grievance was a humiliation to her. But that's all in the past. It's better not to mention it, Jiang Pengji said without hesitation. This piece of paper and this knife have a great background. A great background? Jiang Pengji said, the raw material of paper is plant fiber, but this is the most ancient papermaking technique. For example, the materials used in the current rice paper and bamboo paper are the most primitive. To produce a large amount of paper, a large number of plants must be cut down. Excessive cutting will damage the environment and worsen it. For example, dense forests will turn into wastelands. In my world, the law prohibits using plants to make paper because it is too polluting and the cost is too high. However, people will always use paper in their lives. This is something that cannot be replaced by external objects, so there is emulation paper. Chapter 1070. Xueqi had a hard time listening, but he could understand a little. What about this sword? Jiang Pengji said, I've seen this sword a few times. It's the sword of a federal marshal. Marshal? Something like a commander-in-chief who controls military power? More than that, Jiang Pengji said. If I have to make an analogy, it's equivalent to the emperor, but its power is higher than the emperor's. There's only one federal marshal, and there are 10 corps commanders under him. Each corps is divided into 10 military regions, and each military region has about 1 million troops. The federal marshal has the highest power to mobilize troops. How much power do you think the federal marshal has? Only the marshal deserves to have a sword made of this material. Xueqi was more and more shocked as he listened. 1 million troops? That was the military power of a military region. If it was the federal marshal, wouldn't he control 100 million troops? How many people was 100 million? Didn't the population of the 5 countries add up to 50 million? Jiang Pengji said, this is the military power during peacetime. If there's a war, the army has to be expanded more than 10 times. Since Jiang Pengji was conscious, the Federation had been fighting everywhere. There was almost no time to rest. The human alliance loved peace, but they couldn't stand the troublesome neighbors, and the war was endless. In the past, she, Jiang Pengji, was also a big boss who controlled hundreds of millions of federal elites. In this life, she led a group of weak warriors to rob a small farm. She was too ashamed to face others. She also wanted to save face. Xueqi couldn't imagine what kind of world his lord's previous life was like. Why? Only the federal marshal has a sword made of this material? Is it similar to the emperor's token? Xueqi didn't understand Jiang Pengji's world, but he could analyze a lot of content from her few words. She said it so calmly, as if she was used to it. It could be seen that his lord's status in her previous life was also extraordinary. Even if she wasn't at the core level, she was at least at the military region level. In this world, she was also a person with power that could overturn the world. This is considered a federal secret. If it was in the past, if I dared to reveal half a word, I would most likely be sent to the military court, then dismissed and... Jiang Pengji made a gesture of cutting off a head, but she said, now. I've said it. This sword is already in front of me. What else can't I say? This saber is made of a special material, and only one can be forged in the entire world. It wasn't accurate to say that he had searched the entire world. To be more precise, he had searched the entire universe. Jiang Pengji was amused when she saw the confidential documents. The universe was vast and boundless, and intelligent creatures had only explored a small area. How could they dare to say that they had searched the entire universe? Who gave him face? Wasn't there a second blade in front of her now? So rare. What kind of substance is it that there's only a little of it in the world? Xueqi looked at the knife. Other than feeling that the knife was very sharp, he could not see anything special about it. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, It's rare not because of its material, but because it can kill a god. Slay god? Are there really gods in this world? Xueqi was even more shocked. There are no gods in this world. I'm just bluffing. Zhang Pengji's smile was somewhat evil. She said, "The god that I mentioned is, to put it bluntly, a virtual creature." It sounds a little abstract, but you can imagine a virtual creature as something condensed from people's beliefs. It doesn't have a physical body and exists in an illusory world. It's a little like a ghost. In my world, a virtual creature called Tianbao tried in vain to subvert the entire world. It was created by people and possessed great power, comparable to an omnipotent god. Xueqi listened carefully. Everything that Zhang Pengji said was no different from a fantasy story to him. It was strenuous to listen, but he wanted to further understand the person in front of him. In both his previous and current lives, there had never been a moment like now when he was so close to her. A god created by people? It has the ability to overturn rivers and seas and is omnipotent? Zhang Pengji sneered. Something like that. However, a god created by people, no matter how strong it is, has to listen to people, to the ants in its eyes. How can a god be willing to be controlled by ants? Tianbao made use of people's reliance on it to launch a sudden war and cause countless things. It also sold all kinds of secrets to the surrounding forces. In my world, there were wars one after another. Wasn't it the aftermath of the turmoil of Tianbao? It wasn't until the day I died that the war came to an end. But I don't know when it will come again. Tianbao was very similar to the system. Both were top-notch virtual creatures. How could they be willing to be subordinate to others? When Zhang Pengji was possessed by the system and figured out the identity of the other party, she guarded against it. Wasn't it also the aftermath of the disaster of Tianbao? Such a high and mighty existence was like a powerful weapon that could go out of control at any time. Not only could it hurt the enemy, but it could also hurt itself. After the disaster of Tianbao subsided, people created another Tianbao. Because people can't live without Tianbao, there must be a substitute. The marshal's saber appeared at that time. Not only is it a symbol of status, but it is also the only saber in the world that can completely kill Tianbao. The two keep each other in check to prevent a second Tianbao disaster. Xueqi could not imagine why anyone would be unable to leave the heavenly brain, and would not be able to live without it. If that's the case, why would this saber? Xueqi didn't know how to ask. Fortunately, Zhang Pengji understood. It's not the same one. I've seen the saber in the marshal's hand. The style is different. Zhang Pengji raised her hand and put the long saber back into its scabbard. She could feel that in her brain, the two subsystems were trembling. She smiled in satisfaction. Regardless of the intention of the person who gave me the saber, since he gave it to me, how can I refuse? Although there's no god in this world, the blade is extremely hard. It's also excellent for killing enemies. Every time I go to war, my weapon is always bent to the point that even my mother can't recognize it. With this saber, I don't need to change it anymore. Zhang Pengji sighed with emotion. She felt very sour. She used the precious yin and yang jade pendant to flirt with Zi Xiao. She used the more powerful saber to chop people's heads. She had a huge fortune but couldn't spend it. Her life was as lonely as snow. Xueqi was also relieved. Although he heard Zhang Pengji explain the real use of the saber, Xueqi wasn't from that world. He didn't have a deep understanding of it. As long as it was a good saber, the Lord could kill to her heart's content. That was the most important thing. As for the person who gave the gift, Xueqi suddenly thought of something and asked. The person said that this saber was made by your father. Was this really made by the old man? Zhang Pengji said, "Do you think it's possible for my father to make this kind of saber? The biggest possibility should be my father from my previous life? Although I don't know who he is. When I was 3 years old, I was found in the ruins of a battlefield and brought back to an orphanage. Then, I was adopted by a couple. The couple treated me fairly well, but because of some special reasons, they sent me to the military school for children in the war zone. There, I was treated as a genetic warrior similar to a man of sacrifice, and raised in secret. My childhood memories are too vague, but I'm sure that there aren't any memories of my birth parents. There were millions of orphans in the Federation. Jiang Pengji couldn't find out about her past. She seemed to have appeared out of thin air. She was very fickle by nature. If she couldn't find anything, then so be it. She wouldn't force it. Jiang Pengji held the saber in one hand and scooped up the black and white meatball with the other. It's late at night. Zixiao, are you going to bed? Wei Xi's expression changed slightly. He seemed to have remembered the unfinished business just now. I'm not going to do anything to you today. I'm just hugging you to sleep. Don't think too much. She had a hunch that she wouldn't die anytime soon. What the system said was all F***king flattery. My lord. What do you mean you can't do it? Does this sound like something a woman would say? Wait, was the lord also a woman in her previous life? Chapter 1071. Jiang Pengji immediately noticed Wei Xi's abnormality. She secretly looked at Wei Xi's side profile while stroking the black and white meatball's fur, wondering how long it could hold it in for. Facts had proven that Wei Xi was an enigma. Not only did he have a lot of thoughts, but he was also meticulous. If he was not exposed, he would be able to hold it in as if nothing had happened. Zixiao, sooner or later you will become a teenage mutant ninja turtle. Jiang Pengji could not help but use the words of the audience in the streaming room to tease him. Wei Xi could have secrets with anyone, but there was no need to hide them from her, especially when the secrets were related to her. Wei Xi was lying upright on the bed, his body covered with a blanket that had the fragrance of honey locust. The two of them were neither too close nor too far away. His arm could feel the heat emitted from her body. With such a stove lying beside him, stirring up his emotions, how could he sleep? Hearing Jiang Pengji's voice, he came back to his senses immediately. He looked a little confused. Although he didn't know what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were, he had a feeling that it wasn't anything good. If you have any questions, just ask. You already know my biggest secret, so do you think I'll be stingy with my other small secrets? Jiang Pengji smiled and pried his words out. Wei Xi held it in for a while and asked her in a low voice. What does my lord think about Long Yang? The topic had changed too much. Even Jiang Pengji could not guess what Wei Xi was worried about. Long Yang? Are you talking about the love between men? Jiang Pengji scooped up the black and white meat from her stomach to prevent it from suffocating under the blanket. The meatball whimpered softly, lazily lying between the two of them. Its little head turned left and right, as if it was observing them in the dark. Exactly, Wei Xi said. Does my lord object to this? Jiang Pengji said, feelings have nothing to do with gender. I'm not an old-fashioned person. Wei Xi replied. Oh. His expression became more and more strange. Jiang Pengji had an ominous premonition. Because it was Wei Xi, Jiang Pengji was unwilling to use other methods to beat around the bush, so she simply played a straight ball. She smiled and said, I'm using my status as the lord to order you to say whatever you have to say. Don't hide anything. Wei Xi's lips moved and his eyes met hers. After a while he said hesitantly, My lord has the looks of a dragon and a phoenix, a rare talent in the world. Such a carefree and unrestrained temperament is extremely rare even among men, let alone women. In my lord's previous life. He could not continue. Jiang Pengji understood. You mean, you suspect that I was a man in my previous life? That's why you asked me what I think about Long Yang? Wei Xi's expression darkened and he nodded. Zixiao, why are you so cute? Jiang Pengji walked past the black and white meatball and smiled as she pressed Wei Xi back onto the bed. Half of her body was pressed against his. If I were really a man, what would you do? Wei Xi said. If that's the case, I can understand why His Majesty in the previous life was so resistant to fertility. As a man, he turned into a woman. Not only was he subservient, he also wanted to have children like a woman. Strangely, not only did Wei Xi not find it unacceptable, but he felt wronged for Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji laughed heartily, but she was afraid that her voice would be too loud and attract the night watchman, so she simply snuggled in Wei Xi's arms, her shoulders trembling. Your imagination is really more terrifying than a black hole. Is this also considered a type of coldness? Jiang Pengji stopped laughing, and the corners of her eyes were filled with tears. She said, It's not because of this that I'm resistant to fertility. In my previous life, fertility was not a woman's business. Xueqi opened his eyes wide in shock. Could it be that in the Lord's previous life, a man was pregnant for 10 months? He could not help but think of himself with a big belly. His expression was red and green. Of course, it's not a man's business. Jiang Pengji admired his expression and said after she was happy, "The man contributes his essence and the woman provides the egg. The combination of the two is a fetus, which is placed on a special device. When the fetus is fully developed, the child is considered born. During the whole process, the woman does not have to provide a palace room and spends a few months to conceive the child. This practice is also against the law." Xueqi was dumbfounded as he listened. What Jiang Pengji said was like a fantasy story to him. It was full of unknown charm. This sounds magical. However, nature has endowed women with the ability to conceive. Is this against the harmony of heaven? Xueqi could not imagine that scene, not to mention that it was against the law for a woman to be pregnant. He did not dare to do that even in his daydreams. Jiang Pengji smiled and explained the reason to him. Xueqi was fascinated by it. He tried to understand Jiang Pengji's world and past from her few words. Only then did he understand why the emperor in his previous life and the lord in this life had strongly promoted women's camps. The more he understood, the heavier Xueqi's heart was. He suddenly did not dare to think about it, and he did not dare to delve into it. What kind of mood did the emperor in his previous life have when she gave birth to a long life? After all, to her, longevity was enough. The existence of a long life was really unnecessary. Sleep. If you don't sleep now, you won't be able to sleep when the sun rises. Jiang Pengji put her hand on his waist. The two of them faced each other on a pillow, like a pair of inseparable lovers. The black and white meatball was sandwiched in the middle. Seeing that the two of them did not speak, it softly whimpered twice and simply lay down to sleep. To outsiders, the scene was warm and peaceful. For the subsystem in the center of the whirlpool, it was really like a year. If Jiang Pengji did not get the knife, although she could still kill the subsystem, she would definitely hurt herself. In the future, when she faced the main body of the system, it would be hard to predict the outcome. This was also the reason why Jiang Pengji trapped the subsystem. First, it was to not alert the enemy, and second, it was also to be safe. Now that she had a treasure that could kill virtual creatures, she had no worries here. Naturally, the subsystem would be in danger. Jiang Pengji cherished the time alone with Xueqi, so she did not find trouble with the subsystem immediately. The sky outside the window was just beginning to brighten. Jiang Pengji opened her eyes and quietly lifted the bedding. She left without alarming anyone. When she returned to her residence, the sun was almost up. Jiang Pengji pretended that nothing had happened. She washed up, brushed her teeth, changed her clothes, and went to the martial arts training field for a morning practice as usual. "My lord is here." Li Yun was bare-chested, revealing his strong and powerful muscles. His whole body was steaming with sweat. In the words of the audience in the streaming room, the little angel had also evolved into a mobile hormone. Jiang Pengji was streaming. Li Yun's appearance naturally did not escape the discerning eyes of the group of people who were crazy about appearances. The whole screen was full of comments like, "The little angel's muscles are so great. The capital is majestic. Stretch out your hand to touch and lick," and so on. They deeply suspected that if the streaming room introduced the virtual touch function, would Li Yun's integrity, muscles, and *** be preserved? Jiang Pengji sighed with emotion. The morals of the world were deteriorating day by day, and people's hearts were not what they used to be. I'll practice a bit to prevent my bones from rusting. Li Yun held a spear in one hand. With his sharp eyes, he saw the brand new blade in Jiang Pengji's hands. Just by looking at it, he felt the aura of the knife was threatening. It must be a good knife. Chapter 1072. Jiang Pengji glanced at the silver spear in Li Yun's hand. It was Li Yun's treasure. It would be difficult to compensate for it if it was broken. "I don't mind practicing, but I'm afraid your spear will break." Li Yun's expression was one of disapproval. The spear in his hand was made from extremely precious materials and the world's best smelting and forging techniques. It had accompanied Li Yun in battle for many years and was still brand new. Jiang Pengji saw that he didn't believe her, so she held the hilt of the sword with her right hand and easily pulled it out. This sword was not only longer than a normal sword, but it was also terrifyingly heavy. It was much heavier than Jian Yan's double axes. The snow-white blade drew a white light in the air, the sharp edge making people feel pressured. Li Yun practiced the long spear, but he also knew how to use a sword. To a general of this era, a weapon was like a luxury car to a modern man. In a way, it was a wife. When the blade was unsheathed, Li Yun's eyes lit up and he blurted out, "Good sword! Take a look." Jiang Pengji gestured for someone to bring a normal sword over. She held it and waved it. A white light flashed and a crisp cracking sound rang out. With a clang, the two halves of the sword fell to the ground, stirring up some dust. Li Yun was dumbfounded. This sword came at the right time. I can save some expenses in the future. It's not like I have to reforge my saber every time I fight a battle. To her, this divine weapon that could threaten the sky's brain could only be used to kill people and cut fruits, and also to make the system fearful. Other than that, did it have any other value? Nothing. Li Yun didn't use a sword, but it didn't stop him from admiring it like a beauty. "Lord, does this sword have a name? What's the big deal about cutting a hair?" The sword in his lord's hand could go head-to-head with other weapons and even cut the opponent in half like a fruit. It was definitely a divine weapon. Jiang Pengji was bad at naming. There was no doubt about that. Faced with Li Yun's tricky question, she thought about it and said, "It's called Deity Slayer." Simple and domineering, obvious at a glance. Li Yun sighed. Deity Slayer? A divine weapon deserves a good name. It wasn't that his lord didn't know how to name things, but why did she give Bai Bai such a bad name? Every time Li Yun called out to Bai Bai, he felt an inexplicable sense of shame. After practicing with her knife for a while, Jiang Pengji also helped the cooks in the camp chop a pile of firewood. She only stopped when she was slightly sweaty. The audience in the streaming room had long been paying attention to the knife in Jiang Pengji's hand. Such a saber was not something that could be made with the forging techniques of this era. Even in their era, according to a certain Tibetan army veteran, it seemed to be very difficult to achieve. No matter how the audience discussed, Jiang Pengji kept her guard up and refused to reveal anything. Finally, the audience concluded, "Unreal City, the streamer is a cheat. She used to be a human-shaped weapon, and now she has an artifact cheat. She's ready to go to heaven." Zhaoran, according to the recent trending news, the streamer was supposed to participate in PlayerUnknown's Battleground, Clash of the Titans. But in the end, she entered the wrong game and sneaked into PlayerUnknown's Battleground. Crate as soon as you land. May I ask, such a cheater, when did the GM ban her account? Nutty and Little Pudding, #PickNose1. Kiki, the streamer has banned the GM account. Are you afraid? Xinyue, GM, Jiang Pengji, can you have some F*King self-awareness? Streamer, I don't have any F*King self-awareness. I'm very arrogant. Jiang Pengji looked at the screen full of jokes, and the corners of her lips curled up. Well, to a certain extent, Nutty and Little Pudding was correct. She could indeed ban the GM account, but would the subsystem be banned? After sweating all over and eating breakfast, Jiang Pengji began to deal with official business. They had just gained a foothold in Qianyan County in Song Prefecture, and the grain line was barely smooth. However, the Mengs were the local tyrant of Song Prefecture. They had been operating in Song Prefecture for hundreds of years, and their resources were immeasurable. Jiang Pengji was afraid that if she was not careful, she would reveal a flaw and give the Mengs an opportunity. During that time, other than Meng Hang who sent some documents, Jiang Pengji basically buried herself in all kinds of bamboo slips and documents. She could keep her composure, but the subsystem could not. Jiang Pengji, what's your background? The subsystem number one's voice carried a hint of anger, as if it was a girl who found out that her rich fiancé was a country bumpkin who owed millions of yuan. The girl's heart was deeply hurt, and she scolded the heartless person. Jiang Pengji was also curious. What background can I have? Didn't I tell you before? The subsystem number one gritted its teeth and said, If you don't have a background, do you really think the sword in your hand fell from the sky? The appearance of the God Slayer instantly broke the balance between Jiang Pengji and the system. The subsystem had a natural fear of the patrolling merchants, like a criminal who saw the police. It was naturally afraid. It never imagined that the patrolling merchants would appear and leave behind such a precious weapon. What did Jiang Pengji do to deserve this? He was merely a mortal. Even if he was the chosen one of this plane, He was nothing more than an ant to the plainer patrol merchants. Not to mention taking care of her or befriending her, it was a waste of time to look at her. Therefore, the subsystem number 1 could not figure out the reason why the patrolling merchants took care of Jiang Pengji. After thinking about it, it felt that Jiang Pengji must have a backer. "I'm not like you, full of lies." Jiang Pengji sneered. She said, "I've told you everything about my background. Genetic warriors were equivalent to death soldiers. Their mortality rate was far higher than the federal elites on the battlefield. If Jiang Pengji had a backer, how could she have been chosen? Most importantly, before becoming a genetic warrior, one had to erase their past memories to ensure absolute loyalty to the Federation. Based on this alone, Jiang Pengji was certain that she had no background. The subsystem number 1 did not listen. "You're lying." It looked at Jiang Pengji's basic information again. At the age of 35, she took over the heavy responsibility of being the head of the army from her former superior. Before that, she was promoted to the rank of brigadier general based on her military merits. After that, she gained the favor of the previous head of the army and became one of the candidates for the successor. Although Jiang Pengji was indeed capable of being the head of the army, her rank did not match. She had taken a huge leap. Was she not afraid of her crotch splitting? Actually, if the subsystem number 1 understood the war environment in Jiang Pengji's previous life, her experience was not considered unexpected. There were many geniuses who were better than her. She was very inspirational, but she was only considered average. She was young, but she had been in the army for longer than many senior generals. "You must have a backer." The system had cheated countless hosts, but it had never thought that it would encounter a cheat that it could not afford to provoke. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She was inexplicably angry. "If I had a backer, I would have turned you into ashes 800 years ago." In her previous life, she had climbed up by relying on her own abilities. How could she be accused of having connections because of a single sentence from the system? "If it weren't for the fact that I can't bear to part with the people in the streaming room, I really want to cut all of you up." The God Slayer in the baby's hand was already restless and thirsty. With the existence of the God Slayer, Jiang Pengji was not so afraid of the system. She could calmly wait for the day the net was drawn. Now she was the one who played chess. Chapter 1073. Zixiao, what are you carrying? Meng Heng and the rest were busy, but Wei Ci, who usually arrived first, was late. He seemed to be carrying something in his arms. A faint smile appeared on Wei Ci's face. He moved his right hand slightly, and a small head timidly popped out of his wide sleeve. Its bright black eyes looked around, and its 2 claws were placed on both sides of its head. The pink and tender claws were crystal clear. The little thing whimpered, like a baby's unconscious humming, with a hint of laziness and coquettishness. Coupled with its harmless and adorable appearance, no one could harden their heart upon seeing it. Meng Heng knew what it was at a glance. Isn't this the cub of an iron-eating beast? Zixiao likes this little thing too? Wei Ci did not like it at all. It was obvious that the Lord did not tell him how to deal with it. It was clingy, so he had no choice but to bring it along in case no one took care of it. Before Wei Ci could explain, Meng Heng said, "An iron-eating beast cub looks harmless and interesting, but it's different when it grows up. Ferocious beasts are wild and hard to tame. If Zixiao keeps it by your side, there's no guarantee that it won't hurt you. It's fine to raise it now, but not when it's older." Wei Ci looked down at the little fellow, and his lips curled into a faint smile. The little fellow did not know what was going on. It laid there, opened its mouth and bit his sleeve. After a long while, it spat it out. "I understand. Thank you for the reminder, Xueqi," Wei Ci said. "I heard that iron-eating beast cubs are very fragile and not easy to raise. If Zixiao likes it, it's better to find an experienced servant and let him take care of it." Meng Heng kindly reminded him. Iron-eating beasts were different from ordinary pets. Looking at this cub, it was about 2 to 3 months old. If it was not carefully taken care of, it might die. I heard that iron-eating beasts are very protective of their cubs. Where did Zixiao get one? Wei Ci could not talk about what happened last night, so he could only vaguely say, "I picked it up by accident." Meng Heng nodded in understanding. He said, "Iron-eating beasts are different from ordinary beasts. Their cubs are all taken care of by their mother. Mother beasts are very protective of their cubs. Under normal circumstances, they would not abandon their own children. Xiao picked it up by accident, perhaps because its mother had met with misfortune. It's good for you to raise it. Although it's a little beast, it's so cute. It would be a pity if it died prematurely. Unbeknownst to them, Meng Heng's words hit the nail on the head. When this black and white meatball was found, its mother's body was already stiff, and the cub had been starving for 2 days. As it was not convenient for the person who found the cub to keep it, he threw it to Zhang Pengji and it landed in Wei Si's hands. Wei Si was a busy man. When he was busy, he could not take care of the little guy. He could only prepare a basin of milk with good honey for it. Meng Heng had said that an iron-eater cub's stomach was not as strong as an adult vicious beast's, so it could not be fed with normal food. The black and white meatball was also very obedient. It buried its entire head in the small basin and licked it from time to time. Its 2 meaty claws clung to the edge of the basin and refused to let go. It licked and licked until the bottom of the small basin of milk could be seen, but it still wanted more. Since when did Xiao like this kind of thing? The black and white meatball burped and was about to crawl towards Wei Si when an abominable big hand picked it up. Feng Zhen pinched the plump flesh on Meatball's body, and the little fellow let out 2 disgruntled cries. Wei Si repeated helplessly. I picked it up by chance. Feng Zhen bullied the black and white meatball. The little fellow cast a pair of pitiful eyes at Wei Si for help and extended its meaty claws towards him. Hey, it's quite intelligent. All living things have intelligence. It knows who is good to it and who is bad to it. Wei Si saw that Feng Zhen was despised by the black and white meatball, and the corners of his lips curled into a deeper smile. You guys are quite free. Wei Si was about to take the black and white meatball back when Zhang Pengji's voice came from outside. My lord. Wei Si and Feng Zhen bowed at the same time. Feng Zhen wanted to stuff the black and white meatball into his sleeves to destroy the evidence of slacking during office hours. The viewers in the streaming room had sharp eyes and noticed the black and white meatball. Fengqi Wutong, streamer, I'm exposing a thief who stole a panda. Hidden Fog Jie. Feng Longzi, why haven't you put down the national treasure? If you keep holding on to it, the national treasure Fatida will feel very uncomfortable. Sui Qingzhe. Streamer, you've released the pandas of the Gaoyue tribe deep into the mountains. I thought I wouldn't be able to see pandas in the streaming room in my lifetime. I didn't expect you to be such a person. You actually took advantage of us not noticing to secretly keep the smallest and cutest, Xiaoshuo Wushuang. Streamer, today I'm streaming stroking cats. Even if you don't do anything and just look at Fatty Da, the baby will be satisfied. Zhang Pengji asked with a smile. Sure, who asked you to hide my daughter? Feng Zhen couldn't wrap his head around it. When did he hide a young master? Bah! Since when did he have a young master? He was stunned. After a while, he realized that the daughter Zhang Pengji was referring to was the meatball in his hand. Did you raise it, my lord? If I didn't raise it, could it be that you raised it? Zhang Pengji took back the black and white meatball. The little fellow nestled in Zhang Pengji's arms obediently. Its 2 meaty paws covered its eyes. It looked like it was sleeping soundly, but in fact, it secretly moved one of its paws to observe Feng Zhen. Feng Zhen looked at Wei Si and then at his lord. His eyes flashed with understanding. He tactfully left to give Wei Si and Zhang Pengji some space to interact. The audience keenly sensed that something was wrong. The atmosphere between their streamer and beauty CI was too warm and harmonious. Liangshi Musadeizi. It can't be, the single dog streamer is finally going to abandon us? Pianxian Dia Wu. Woof, I'm crying. I'm going to be abused just watching a live stream. Is there no place for single dogs in this world? Reality proved that the audience's worries were unnecessary. Zhang Pengji and Wei Si weren't people who prioritized relationships. Most of their conversation was related to work. It had nothing to do with romance, only boring political affairs. Is there any news from Bogeo? Zhang Pengji asked Wei Si as she stroked the meatball's fur. Wei Si could only put down the pen in his hand and said seriously, Magistrate Huang used Gorge River as a foothold and sent troops north to Cangzhou. My lord annihilated the Meng's minions, the Gaoyue clan. Calculating the time, Magistrate Huang should have sent news of victory. However, I'm worried about something. What is it? Wei Si said, I'm worried about the leader of the Mengs in Songzhou, Meng Zhan. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and smiled. What's there to worry about? Wei Xi said, ever since my lord annihilated the Gaoyue clan, the Mengs seem to have given up struggling. Our army attacked Chenyan County and encountered almost no resistance along the way. The more it's like this, the more I feel uneasy. Meng Zhan is ruthless and not easy to deal with. Wei Xi was worried that Meng Zhan was preparing a big move. As someone who had been reborn, Wei Xi's prophetic advantage was getting smaller and smaller. However, some people's temperaments hadn't changed. He could always find some clues. According to Wei Xi's understanding, Meng Zhan wasn't someone who would easily admit defeat. His ambition was greater than his clan. In his previous life, Meng Zhan married his mistress's daughter to Huang Song. The two families united by marriage and plotted against each other. However, Meng Zhan was one step behind. He didn't manage to take over Huang Song's foundation. Instead, Huang Song took advantage of him. Unable to reverse the situation, guess what Meng Zhan did? He promised two families for one Songzhou. One was the Yi family of Beiyuan, and the other was the Nye family of Zhongzhou. Giving up Zhanjiang Pass and Yumen Pass opened the door for the two families to covet Dongqing's territory. Chapter 1074. There were 5 countries in the world with wide terrains and different climates. Zhongzhou had the largest area, the most fertile land, and the most powerful country. It had always been in existence that the other 4 countries coveted but dared not touch. Dongqing and Xichang had moderate climates, but the former had internal strife while the latter had a smaller territory. They didn't have an advantage among the 5 countries. Beiyuan was a cold and bitter land with long winters and short summers. Its terrain was more northerly than the Beijiang, and its people were tough. As for Nanxing, it was humid and rainy with heavy miasma. There were many rivers and rivers. It had been destroyed by the 4 factions of Nanman, so it wasn't worth mentioning. The Dongqing royal family existed in name only. The feudal lords in Zhongzhou were divided, while the aristocrats in Beiyuan were in charge. The Yi family in Beiyuan was even more powerful than the royal family in Beiyuan. Jiang Pengji thought of Meng Zhan's record of colluding with the Beijiang. Her originally warm expression turned gloomy. If Meng Zhan was really crazy and let go of Zhanjiang Pass and Yumen Pass, he would lead a wolf into the house. Dongqing's already chaotic situation would be even worse. The black and white ball of meat in her arms whimpered. It seemed to feel the hostility from her and showed a wronged expression. Jiang Pengji inserted her fingers into the ball's fur and stroked it from time to time to soothe its emotions. Zixiao, are you worried that the forces in Zhongzhou and Beiyuan will intervene in Dongqing? Jiang Pengji said, your worry isn't unreasonable. The Mengs didn't hesitate to cooperate with the forces in the Beijiang to make trouble for me. Now that I've forced them to a dead end, it's hard to guarantee that they won't give up. The Mengs harmed others without benefiting themselves. They would rather give Songzhou to others than see it fall into Jiang Pengji's hands. Jiang Pengji curled her lips and sneered. I just killed a bastard son. Meng Zhan is ruthless. He bore grudges for 7 or 8 years. Wei Xi showed a helpless expression. If Meng Zhan had heard what he said, he would have jumped up in anger. What did she mean by, I just killed a bastard son? Meng Zhan didn't have many children. He would be heartbroken if he lost one. Jiang Pengji pinched the pads of the black and white ball of meat and held its little claws in her hands. She played with it and said, Zixiao, you reminded me of something. Compared to the forces in Zhongzhou and Beiyuan, we should be more worried about Bogeo. Wei Xi was stunned. Does my lord mean that Prefecture Overseer Huang poses a greater threat? It's not that Bogeo is a big threat. I'm just worried that the Mengs will have the idea of sending 3 people to the same place. Not only did he contact the Yi clan of Beiyuan and the Nye clan of Zhongzhou, I'm afraid he also contacted Bogeo in secret. She smiled, her eyes revealing a scheming glint. The Yi family of Beiyuan or the Nye family of Zhongzhou may be powerful, but their foundation in Dongqing is too shallow. If Meng Zhan was sent out of Songzhou, the 2 families might not be able to defend themselves. On the other hand, if Meng Zhan gave Songzhou to Bogeo, it would be Bogeo's territory. Would I be able to snatch it from Bogeo's hands? Since the foreign powers had already sent gifts, There was no reason for the neighboring feudal powers to not send gifts as well. To put it bluntly, before Meng Zhan died, he wanted to create some hatred for Jiang Pengji. When Wei Xiai thought of this, his face turned as pale as snow. According to his understanding of Meng Zhan, it was highly likely that he would do so. Wait a minute. An idea flashed in Wei Xi's mind. He suddenly understood something and his expression was extremely solemn. Master. Oh no. What's wrong? Jiang Pengji asked. I'm afraid the Mengs don't have any soldiers to use. Wei Xiai said, ever since we entered Songzhou, the biggest obstacle our army encountered was the Gaoyue clan. After destroying the Gaoyue clan, we attacked Chenyan County, but we didn't encounter any decent resistance along the way. That was unusual. I thought the Mengs were deliberately trying to mislead us. Now that I think about it, it's highly likely that the Mengs didn't have enough troops. Meng Zhan simply transferred the troops from Chenyan County to guard Meng County. They used this to create the illusion that they had enough troops to divert attention so that our army wouldn't dare to act rashly. Then, they secretly sent them out of Songzhou. The Mengs were militaristic and Songzhou wasn't as good as it used to be. Coupled with the destruction of the Gaoyue clan, the Mengs' continued resistance would result in the same result. More than half of Songzhou would fall into Jiang Pengji's hands. Since that was the case, it was better to make a good plan while there was still room for change. Using Songzhou, which didn't have much value, to give Jiang Pengji a few strong enemies. What a good deal. Thinking of this, Jiang Pengji's face darkened. Send scouts into Meng County to spy on them and see how many troops they have. Jiang Pengji's reaction wasn't slow, but she underestimated Meng Zhan's craziness. When he tricked the Gaoyue clan to die, Meng Zhan had secretly sent a few letters to the Nyes of Zhongzhou and the Yis of Beiyuan. As long as the two families agreed to send troops, the Zhongzhou horse farm would be handed over. While waiting for news from the two families, Meng Zhan also wrote a secret letter to Huang Song. The secret letter recorded the grudges between the Mengs and Jiang Pengji in detail. Every word was bloody. It was a textbook of selling pity. At first, Huang Song didn't believe it, but he felt it was a waste not to take a bite of the pie that was delivered to him. A pie that fell from the sky wouldn't be that delicious. If he accepted Songzhou from Meng Zhan, he would definitely have a conflict with Jiang Pengji. Huang Song hadn't conquered Qinzhou yet. His troops were too weak to challenge Jiang Pengji. Accept. Not accept. At the crucial moment, Nye Sun came out and offered a vicious plan. If the Mengs are willing to secretly send troops to Qinzhou, then we will accept the benefits Meng Zhan promised. Huang Song didn't understand for a while, but the other strategists in the tent did. They looked at Nye Sun with some fear. If Nye Sun asked the Mengs to send troops to destroy the royal family, then the Mengs would bear the reputation of the traitors. Then, Huang Song could claim Qinzhou under the banner of justice. If he didn't do that, Huang Song would have to bear a certain amount of stigma if he wanted to conquer Qinzhou. No matter how weak the royal family was, it was still the royal family. All the feudal lords in Dongqing coveted Qinzhou, but none of them wanted to stand out when the royal family was there. If the Mengs were willing to bear the eternal blame, then Huang Song would not only be innocent but also meritorious if he attacked Qinzhou. When Huang Song sent the message to Meng Zhan, the veins on Meng Zhan's forehead bulged. In his rage, he overturned everything that could be overturned. Huang Song, you're so young but you're so ambitious. He didn't want to bear a bit of stigma, but he wanted to take all the benefits. When his anger subsided, Meng Zhan picked up the pen with trembling fingers and wrote a reply to Huang Song with mixed feelings. He suppressed his anger while writing the letter, swallowing the taste of iron that rose in his throat. It's a good thing to be ambitious. Only with great ambition can you fight against Lu Shi for a long time. If Huang Song was weak and couldn't stop Jiang Pengji's cavalry, he would vomit blood. Without Jiang Pengji knowing, Huang Song and Meng Zhan reached an agreement to cooperate. Meng Zhan sent troops to Qinzhou to kill the royal family, and Huang Song followed closely to rescue them. Unfortunately, when Huang Song arrived, the royal family was completely destroyed. Not a single person was left alive. Huang Song could only reluctantly take over the mess. When Jiang Pengji sent scouts to investigate the specific troops in Meng County, Huang Song had already secretly taken over Qinzhou. Not only that, Huang Song also conquered another county in Songzhou with irresistible force. His army surrounded Meng County. Chapter 1075. What Wei Ci and Jiang Pengji were worried about had happened. Huang Song had taken over Chenzhou and Song Prefecture. The Mengs had surrendered with Meng Prefecture. In other words, Jiang Pengji hadn't gained anything. Huang Song had taken all the advantages. If Jiang Pengji hadn't restrained the Gaoyues, they would have suffered great losses. They wouldn't even have gotten Qianyan County. Her face darkened. Her dark eyes flashed with murderous intent. The atmosphere was heavy, sticky, and suffocating. The ministers and generals felt oppressed. The fat man was even more afraid. He tried his best to curl himself into a ball. He rubbed his head against Wei Ci's palm. He wanted to hide his entire body in it. He let out a low whimper, as if he was afraid of something. Only in this way could it feel a sense of security. Wei Ci caressed the fur on its head and back with his palm while he raised his hand nonchalantly and covered its body with his sleeve. Meng Zhan, that old man, he's so calculative. Jiang Pengji held a copper paperweight in her hand. Everyone could clearly see the deep finger marks on the paperweight. The entire paperweight was twisted. They could imagine how angry Jiang Pengji was at that moment. He set me up before he died. If I don't fight back, he'll think I'm made of mud. Meng Heng sat with his head down. He didn't say a word. He retracted his gaze, his face calm and tranquil. No one dared to make a sound. They were afraid to touch Jiang Pengji's bottom line. Meng Zhan had gone too far this time. His plan was ruthless. With Huang Song's help, it was obvious that he wanted Jiang Pengji to swallow this loss. Wei Ci secretly looked around. Seeing that everyone was pretending to be dead one by one, he could only bite the bullet and stand out. My lord, there's no solution to this situation. In my opinion, it's better to retreat in order to advance. Everyone knows that my lord is holding back the Mengs. With your hard work, Magistrate Huang can sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor. It's not too much for my lord to take half of Meng County. All in all, they couldn't let Huang Song take over Meng County. Jiang Pengji sneered. Take half? Isn't that better? If the Mengs did not make such a move, Jiang Pengji could admit defeat and be convinced that Huang Song had conquered 2 counties in Songzhou with his military strength. Who knew that the Meng family would play tricks at this critical juncture? Not only did they help Huang Song take over Chenzhou, but they also gave up 2 counties. The Mengs did this to annoy Jiang Pengji. In this way, if she could swallow this insult, she would not be called Jiang Pengji. Wei Ci sighed and consoled her. Our army has the advantage of geographical and human conditions. Unfortunately, time is not on our side and we have made a mistake. Given the situation, my lord, please don't get angry and harm your health. The only thing we can do now is to think of a way to stop the losses in time. Please reconsider, my lord. Wei Ci was not frightened by Jiang Pengji. Instead, he advised her to calm down with a gentle voice. For a moment, Meng Hun and the other generals looked at him with awe. Their lord's aura was too frightening. Even if they were numb to killing, they were still sweating profusely. The back of their clothes was drenched in sweat. The gazes of the civil officials were much more complicated. A true warrior dared to face an erupting volcano and a furious lord. Wei Ci was the lord's personal fire extinguisher. Although Jiang Pengji was angry, she was still rational. Seeing that the atmosphere in the tent was stagnant, she slightly restrained her aura. Seeing that her expression had cleared up, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. If their lord remained in a state of rage, even if they were not scared to death, they would be nervous to death. Feng Zhen secretly wiped his sweat and bowed. I really have a plan. Maybe we can stop the losses. Jiang Pengji raised her eyelids. Her expression was calm and unruffled, as if she was not the one who had exploded in anger. Zisher, what plan do you have? Tell me. Feng Zhen sorted out his thoughts and bowed. My lord is the appointed magistrate of Wanzhou by the imperial court. You receive your lord's salary, so you should share his burdens. The Mengs are treacherous. They rebelled against their superiors and massacred the royal family. Their crimes are too numerous to list. My lord is a loyal official. Naturally, you must avenge your lord and kill the traitors with your own hands. This was something that Prefecture Overseer Huang could understand. Why don't we send troops from Hu County to Chenzhou to rescue you? Jiang Pengji said angrily, the royal family is all dead. Feng Zhen's eyes shone. Which man in the world doesn't like women? Who can guarantee that the Mengs have really killed off the royal family? Perhaps there are still some among the people. My lord has been receiving the imperial court salary for many years. You should preserve some of the royal family's descendants. If the Mengs said that they had killed off the royal family, then they had really been killed? Would loyal officials and generals not be allowed to lead troops to search for their descendants? Based on this reason alone, Jiang Pengji had the right to deploy troops to Qinzhou. Huang Song had many troops, but not many. If he wanted to completely control Qinzhou, it would take some time. While the enemy's foundation was not stable, it was better to besiege Wei to rescue Zhao, and see whether Huang Song wanted Qinzhou or Cangzhou. Meng Hun said worriedly, I'm afraid it will be too late to deploy troops now. Feng Zhen said, Commander Meng, have you forgotten about Deputy Commander Jing Rong and Deputy Commander Dian? Jing Rong? Deputy Commander Dian? Meng Hun suddenly understood. Yang Si and Dian Wei had been deployed to Hu County by Jiang Pengji. They were in charge of the alliance with Su Bei and had kept a low profile for many years. Hu County was not far from Qinzhou. If they deployed troops from Hu County, they could definitely make it in time. Jiang Pengji's eyes shone with a cold, calculating light, as if she was considering the feasibility of Feng Zhan's words. She turned to ask Feng Jin and the others, Does anyone have anything to say? Feng Jin thought about it, closed his eyes slightly, and cupped his hands in front of his chest. My lord, I don't think it's time to lay my cards on the table with Governor Huang. Jiang Pengji tapped her finger on the table and said coldly, You're right, it's not the right time to lay my cards on the table yet. The atmosphere in the tent was tense. Even the audience in the streaming room did not dare to make jokes. Hearing the conversation between Feng Jin and Jiang Pengji, a few of the more hot-tempered audience could not help but speak up. Chenxi Durian Piao. Meng Zhan is scheming. Huang Song, as an ally, has reached an agreement with the enemy. Although in the face of benefits, it's nothing. But Huang Song's actions are still upsetting. Streamer, are you really going to take this loss? Xiang Wuxian Hao, streamer, when did your temper become so weak? The audience still liked Jiang Pengji, who was always angry. How could she take it lying down when someone was bullying her? Xingye Jingyue. Don't be anxious. I think the streamer must have her own considerations. Maybe there's something we don't know. A small portion of the audience was angry, but most of them were calm. There were even some who were secretly happy to see Jiang Pengji suffer a setback. Although she suffered a setback, the streamer had always been smooth sailing. She was angry at everyone, so it was boring to watch. Shimo Ning. I wonder if there'll be a chance to see Meng Zhan. He counterattacked and made the streamer suffer in silence. That's not easy. Speaking of this, many of the audience expressed their regret. To be able to make the streamer suffer a setback, that's a true warrior. At that moment, a few blue bullet screens appeared timidly. Chapter 1076. All the viewers in the streaming room were dumbfounded. When had they ever seen Meng Zhan? Jiang Pengji also noticed the bullet screen. She frowned and raised her eyebrows. Meng Zhan lived in Cangzhou, and she fought all the time. She had never seen Meng Zhan, so it was impossible for the viewers in the streaming room to have seen him. However, Jiang Pengji suddenly thought of something when she saw the color of the bullet screen. She suddenly understood. The viewers in blue were the viewers of the time-traveling woman's streaming room. Jiang Pengji had never seen Meng Zhan, but it didn't mean that the time-traveling woman hadn't seen Meng Zhan. Maybe when the time-traveling woman met Meng Zhan, she had the streaming room open, so the viewers in that dimension had seen Meng Zhan. Jiang Pengji thought for a moment. That was the most likely guess. It turned out that Jiang Pengji's guess was correct. Not only that, but from the comments of the viewer, she could more or less guess why Meng Zhan valued the bastard son so much. Tangerine lemon candy. That's old news from a long time ago. I was in my first year of high school, and I accidentally entered this streaming room. No, not the streamer's streaming room, the one with the color. Although the content was very embarrassing, the streaming room was very popular. The male and female protagonists were both very good-looking. I liked to watch it when I had nothing to do to relieve my stress from studying. The viewer rambled on and on for a long time before he got to the main topic. Orange lemon candy. I remember there was a rich man in the streaming room who issued a task for the streamer to act as a prostitute and attack the son of an aristocratic family. The streamer's target was Lu Shi at first, but then she changed it to Meng Zhan. To be honest, I had a deep impression of Meng Zhan, not because of his high status or good looks, but because he was the first man to defeat the streamer. He was a real man. Jiang Pengji was surprised. She thought Meng Zhan was also a subject of the time-traveling woman, but he wasn't. He even rejected the time-traveling woman. And then, the viewers had the same thought as Jiang Pengji. They were eager to hear the gossip. The viewer didn't keep them waiting. He quickly sent another bullet screen. Orange lemon candy. The streamer is also proud. As a fairy, how could she be rejected by a mortal? She and Meng Zhan didn't end well. When they were arguing, the streamer said Meng Zhan had weak sperm and called him a natural eunuch. Later, the streamer even arranged a doctor to attack Meng Zhan. I remembered that Meng Zhan had a few maids who warmed his bed. They served him for a few years, but they didn't have any children. Looking at the bullet screen, Jiang Pengji vaguely pieced together the truth of that year. If Meng Zhan really had asthenospermia, it would be extremely difficult for him to make women infertile. It was not unreasonable for him to suspect the blood of Meng Hang and Ye Sun. Under the woman's scheme, the wedding procession was ambushed by bandits the night before Gu Zhan married Meng Zhan. Although the reinforcements had arrived in time and saved the people, it was impossible for Meng Zhan to not have a thorn in his heart. Unfortunately, Gu Zhan did not shed any blood on her wedding night, which seemed to further prove the fact that she had been defiled by the bandits. After that, Gu Zhan was found to be pregnant. Calculating the time, it happened to be around the time of the wedding. Meng Zhan was well aware of his body's problem. Although he had the ability to conceive, the chance of success was too small. It couldn't be a coincidence. At this time, the time-traveling woman created another illusion, letting Meng Zhan see the scene of Gu Dai having an affair with her servant. At this stage, Meng Zhan could still tolerate it. However, Gu Zhan's unwillingness to abort the fetus in her belly deepened Meng Zhan's suspicion. After a series of punches, Gu Zhan and Meng Zhan fell out of each other's hearts. The time-traveling woman tormented Gu Zhan, not only because of Gu Min, but also because of Meng Zhan. Meng Zhan rejected the charming time-traveling woman and married Gu Min's stepsister. How could the time-traveling woman tolerate it? She wouldn't rest until she made some trouble for him. Thinking about it, Jiang Pengji felt that the time-traveling woman was even more disgusting. She only destroyed her soul, which was too easy for her. Pusixio. Weak sperm. Now that you mention it, Meng Zhan's head can be grazed with sheep. Tongzi Liang Tang. Weak sperm isn't absolute infertility. It's just that the probability of getting pregnant is much lower than normal people. This disease can still be improved through nursing. In short, Meng Zhan still has the hope of becoming a father. The fact proved that the audience was right. The time-traveling woman pointed out the defects in Meng Zhan's body. He invited doctors and asked for medicine to cultivate his mind. Although it wasn't as good as normal people, after a few times, he could still have his own children. That was how Meng Zhan's illegitimate son came about. After Gu Zhan fell out of favor, the number of women in Meng Zhan's backyard increased. Everyone's whereabouts were strictly monitored to prevent the possibility of being cuckolded. After so many years, only the concubine and Gu Zhan got pregnant. Their children were Meng Liang and Ye Sun. Meng Zhan didn't believe that Gu Zhen's children were his. Firstly, Gu Zhen's body was weak at that time, and he was in such a condition. They only slept together a few times. The probability of them having children was too low. Secondly, under the interference of the time-traveling woman, Meng Zhan saw Gu Zhan fooling around with the manservants in the front yard. He hated Gu Zhan even more. If it wasn't for the Lu and Gu family's reputation, Meng Zhan would have strangled Gu Zhan to death. Why would he spare her life? The streaming room was bustling with gossip. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyelids. A cold light flashed in her eyes. Meng Zhan had schemed against her before. If she didn't retaliate, it would be too easy for the old man. In this era, there was a habit of not killing those who surrendered. Meng Zhan surrendered to Huang Song. Logically speaking, Huang Song wouldn't kill him. But Jiang Pengji didn't care. Jiang Pengji's temper was too tough. Huang Song didn't know her very well, but he knew most of it. Therefore, after he accepted Meng Zhan's surrender, he didn't let him go. Instead, he locked him up in prison. The rest of the Mengs were demoted to commoners. Guards were sent to watch them. I heard that Meng County is rich and populous. Looks like it doesn't live up to its name. Although he was locked up in prison, the cell was clean and tidy. The bedding still smelled like sunshine. Meng Zhan had 3 meals a day. His life wasn't bad. Although he had surrendered Meng County, there were still too many secrets in Meng Zhan's mind. If Huang Song wanted to know more, he had to deal with him. The more he interacted with him, the more curious Huang Song became. Meng Zhan was obviously a cunning old fox. Why did he act so aggressively? If he had given in to Jiang Pengji, Meng Zhan wouldn't have been able to maintain his former glory, but the Mengs could continue to exist. But now, he had made one wrong move after another. He had lost all his trump cards. Meng Zhan sneered. Governor Huang, you really got what you wanted. I'm no match for you in terms of ambition. I'm even worse when it comes to appetite. Meng Zhan's face was full of fatigue. He looked much older than his actual age. His eye sockets were deep and his eye bags were heavy. His eyes were like a ghost's, making people uncomfortable. Chapter 1077. Huang Song didn't even need to think to know how angry Jiang Pengji was. The war was hard, but he was the one who picked up the benefits. He said half-truthfully, Master Meng, you know Lanting. How could you not know her temperament? Meng Zhan sneered. It was a fake smile. He looked extremely cold. Huang Song, who was sitting opposite him, picked up his tea and took a sip. His lips curled into a smile. Huang Song knew that doing so would offend Jiang Pengji, but the benefits in front of him were too tempting for him to refuse. Wealth comes from risk. If he didn't seize this opportunity, he might not have a chance to make a comeback in the future. He also wanted to go to a higher place and enjoy the scenery of the mountains. He didn't want to stand at the foot of the mountain and look at the person at the top. When he was young, Huang Song only wanted to be a good and virtuous minister who contributed to the country. However, Feng Ju cut off his path of retreat and stirred up his dormant ambition, which was out of control. He didn't want to be below others. Other than climbing up, Huang Song had no other way out. Meng Zhan said, What are you afraid of? Huang Song said, I'm not like you. You can abandon your clan and everything, but I don't have the guts to do so. Although he said this, the wild ambition in his eyes betrayed his inner thoughts. Since I dared to bet, I'm prepared. Meng Zhan sneered. Lu Shi, she can't do anything to you. A group of strategists had analyzed what Meng Zhan said for Huang Song. That was why Huang Song had mixed feelings about Meng Zhan. Just as Meng Zhan said, Jiang Pengji couldn't openly offend Huang Song because of his plan. Why? Meng Zhan gave Cangzhou and Huang Song, but he also sent letters to the Yi family of Beiyuan and the Nye family of Zhongzhou. Since the unification of Zhongzhou, the trade route between the two countries had been closed. News was blocked. Zhongzhou didn't know the situation in Dongqing. As for the Beiyuan was located in the north. There weren't many trade and official exchanges between the two countries. News was also not developed. The Meng family was in Cangzhou. With the two natural barriers in Cangzhou, Zhongzhou and the Beiyuan didn't have any plans to attack Dongqing. At that moment, the Meng family sent such news. How could the Yi family of Beiyuan and the Nye family of Zhongzhou not be tempted? As mentioned earlier, the Beiyuan country was ruled by the aristocrats, and the royal family were all puppets. The Yi clan's authority was not the greatest, but it was not far off from another large clan in the North Abyss. If the Yi family obtained the horse farm in Cangzhou, they could instantly reverse the situation and smoothly control the political power of the Beiyuan. There was no need to mention the Nye clan of Zhongzhou. They were now one of the great dukes of Zhongzhou. Which feudal vassal would lack war horses when conquering the world? The Nye clan didn't have a horse farm. Although they had a strong foundation and could build a strong army, a horse farm was still very attractive to them. Meng Zhan knew what they were thinking. He threw Cangzhou as bait to lure them in, and then he gave Cangzhou to Huang Song. Meng Zhan didn't do it to frame Huang Song. He did it to impede Jiang Pengji. How to restrain him? Outside, there were two strong enemies eyeing her covetously. Jiang Pengji could not possibly fight with Huang Song to the death, and allow the two external forces to take advantage of her. If they were to fight, the two natural strongholds in Songzhou would definitely be breached by the enemy. That was why Feng Jin had said that this wasn't a good opportunity to lay his cards on the table with Huang Song. Meng Zhan could ignore his country and the world, but Zhang Pengji couldn't. Even if she suffered a setback, she still had to think of the big picture. Meng Zhan's anger subsided a little when he thought of Zhang Pengji being bullied, but it couldn't be cured. Only the blood of Lu Shi and his daughter could calm his soul. Huang Song stood up from his seat and said something before he left. Lanting will arrive with his troops in a few days. Does old Master Meng need my help? Huang Song couldn't care less about the grudges between Meng Zhan and Zhang Pengji, but Meng Zhan had indeed helped him a lot. He wouldn't be stingy with his help. No. Just ask Lu Lanting to come over. Meng Zhan knew what Huang Song meant, but he wasn't afraid of death. He didn't need the pity and help of an ant. Even if he died, he wouldn't bow down to his enemy. After 2 months, Huang Song and Zhang Pengji met again, but the atmosphere was not as harmonious as before. However, everyone was a drama queen. No matter what they were thinking, they pretended to be good to each other. Where's Meng Zhan? Zhang Pengji stationed the army at the border of Qianyan County. She brought 5,000 elites to the government office of Meng County. It used to be Meng Zhan's residence, but now it was Huang Song's temporary residence. Huang Song suggested with a smile, "Lanting must be tired from the long journey. Why don't you rest first and interrogate him tomorrow?" Even when he met Zhang Pengji's eyes, he didn't show any signs of cowardice. Zhang Pengji said, "Fine. It doesn't matter to me whether he lives a day longer or a day shorter." Huang Song set up a banquet for Zhang Pengji. There was an endless supply of good wine and delicacies. It was much more luxurious than the banquet in Hada County. The time was different, and the mood was different. No one was in the mood to enjoy. They looked happy on the outside, but their hearts were heavy. The civil officials were introverted, and they were good at disguising themselves. They were almost flawless. In comparison, the generals were less composed. The worse the temper, the more impatient they were. At that moment, Meng Hing secretly winked at Jiang Nongqin. Jiang Nongqin, who always kept a low profile, drank a cup and put it down in dissatisfaction. The table made a dull noise. "Why do I only have water here? Are you purposely neglecting me?" No one was in the mood to dance. When they heard Jiang Nongqin's words, they all turned to look at her. Only then did many people realize that she was a female general, but she was mingling with a group of men. Jiang Nongqin ignored the gazes of others and pointed at the wine goblet of the old general Yuan Xian. She said in an arrogant tone, "Someone, bring me that bronze wine goblet and a jar of strong wine. I don't want it if it's not strong." Yuan Xian was already filled with anger. When he saw Jiang Nongqin pointing her finger at him, his anger flared up. How could a guest be so rude? A guest was a guest. How could a guest be the host? "Young lady, drinking some light fruit wine will do," Jiang Nongqin said. "I'm the captain of 20,000 troops. If I'm dissatisfied with the bland water, what's wrong with changing the wine goblet?" Yuan Xian snorted coldly. He obviously didn't believe Jiang Nongqin's words. Zhang Pengji, who was sitting at the head of the table, looked at Yuan Xian coldly and said, "Old general, is there anything you're dissatisfied with?" Yuan Xian choked. Meng Hang came out to smooth things over and barely managed to dodge the matter. In the end, his gaze fell on Nye Sun. There was concern in his eyes. He realized that Nye Sun was also looking at him with gratitude. If Meng Hang hadn't come out to smooth things over, it would have been difficult for anyone to clean up the mess. At that moment, Zhang Pengji said. Zhang Pengji and Huang Song saw everything that happened. She lowered her voice and asked Huang Song. Chapter 1078. Huang Song subconsciously did not want to agree. He was a little hesitant. Zhang Pengji did not wait for him to think of an excuse and made a joke. "Bogeo, you won't be reluctant if I ask you for Mr. Nye, right?" "Why would I be reluctant? Lanting is willing to let Chang Yun accompany him. This is his trust in him." Although he said that, Huang Song knew very well that if Yuan Xin's hostility was not too obvious and made Zhang Pengji unhappy, she would not have taken such a precautionary action. Zhang Pengji stationed the army in Qianyan County and rushed there with only 5,000 men. She had taken a huge risk. Huang Song could completely understand that she was very defensive and repelled people who were hostile to her. Yuan Xin drank a little too much. When he heard that Nie Sun wanted to get close to Jiang Pengji's people, his nerves tightened. I'm just a boorish man. I can't say extravagant words of praise. Burp. Governor of Liuzhou is honorable. A mere Nie Chengyun does not carry enough weight. How can he match my lord's friendship with you? If word gets out, outsiders will say that my lord is neglecting a distinguished guest and doesn't know etiquette. Yuan Xin's cheeks were red from drinking, but his eyes were not cloudy. Instead, they flashed with a narrow-minded and stern look. I heard. Burp. I heard that Governor of Liuzhou and Feng Bijia are good friends when they were young. Feng Bijia is my lord's most trusted right-hand man. It will not be impolite if Feng Bijia accompanies you. As he spoke, he burped. The wine bottle in his hand trembled and half of the wine was gone. It seemed that he was very drunk. In fact, he seemed drunk but not drunk. His mind was still very clear. There was only one thought in his mind. He absolutely could not let Nie Sun and Jiang Pengji's people get too close. Unbeknownst to him, his precautionary action had put Nie Sun in an awkward position. Huang Song's expression was slightly unfriendly. He could only laugh dryly and apologize to Jiang Pengji on behalf of Yuan Xin. Feng Ju, who was sitting below, was about to step forward to speak when Jiang Pengji said with a tired and bored expression, Forget it, forget it. Why are you so defensive? We're family, why speak so differently? If Huijie has time and Bogeo is willing to let him go, it'll be good to accompany me. Seeing this, Feng Ju had no choice but to swallow his words of apology. He cupped his hands and said, If Governor of Liuzhou doesn't mind, I will accompany you. The atmosphere of the banquet was strange to begin with, and now it became even more stagnant. Huang Song tried his best to lighten the mood, but the crowd still did not know the taste of food. There was suspicion and wariness among them. Jiang Pengji pretended to be drunk and left. She returned to the tent arranged by Huang Song. She asked someone to get a basin of cold water for her and then buried her face in the cold water. After a while, Jiang Pengji raised her head, closed her eyes, and searched for the position of the cloth. She grabbed a towel and wiped the water stains on her face. Her pale face was flushed red because of the cold water and the towel. When she opened her eyes, she happened to see the screen full of bullet screens. Most of the audience was comforting Jiang Pengji. Although they were only spectators, the strange atmosphere of the banquet and the unnatural interaction between old friends made everyone feel that something was wrong. Shimo Nian Nian, my heart aches for the streamer. Things remain the same, but people have changed. It's too cruel. Hong Bangxi Feng, last night, I stayed up late to chase after Feng Tian's group. Today, when I saw the scene between the streamer and Huang Song, I suddenly remembered Crab saying to Bao Zi that we will never be the same again. Oh my God, I've been stabbed twice in a row. My heart is broken. Even though the audience had been mentally prepared for the streamer and Huang Song to quarrel, they still felt bad when they saw the scene. In this regard, Jiang Pengji could only say that they were still too emotional. Streamer V, if I were Bogeo today, guess what I would do? I would set up a Hongmen banquet, cut the weeds, and eliminate the roots. Bogeo did not do this, not because he did not think of it or because he was not that vicious, but because he was not confident and had concerns. Although it was just a short sentence, the audience felt the coldness and heartlessness that came rushing at them. The audience was stunned. Many felt that Jiang Pengji's thoughts were too dark and could not help but refute. Crab Huang Bao Xueqi. If Huang Song is really so bad, why didn't he do anything at the banquet? This is his home ground. He poisoned or set up an ambush in advance. Streamer, you didn't bring many people with you. If it's really a Hongmen banquet, no matter how I look at it, Huang Song has a higher chance of winning. Jiang Pengji smiled, her expression a little cold. Streamer V, Bogeo has seen me kill people. No one under him can stop me, so he said that he is not confident. If we really fight, the first person to die will be him. As for concerns, if Bogeo and I fight, others will benefit. It's not worth it. At that moment, Feng Ju sent someone to send Huang Song, who reeked of alcohol, back to the backyard. Lady Qi hurriedly sent someone to get some hangover soup. Lady, leave the hangover soup first. Let me get drunk for a while. Huang Song supported his swollen head with his right hand on the short table. His breathing was heavy and tired. How much did you drink today, Lang Jun? Lady Qi said angrily. You haven't recovered from your chronic illness, yet you still dare to go against the doctor's advice and drink without restraint? Huang Song said with a slurred tongue. I didn't drink much. I'm only half drunk. It's good to be drunk. At least I won't let my imagination run wild. Let my imagination run wild? Lady Qi was surprised. Huang Song leaned against Lady Qi's shoulder and buried his head in the crook of her neck. He lowered his voice and said, Lanting only brought 5,000 elites with her. This is a good opportunity. Perhaps there won't be a better opportunity than this. However, I can't act rashly, and I can't lose my footing. He had to restrain the demons and greedy heart that were clamoring in his heart, so that he would not make a stupid decision that he would regret. Instead of letting his mind clear, it was better to get half drunk and use his headache to divert his attention. Lady Qi was stunned for a moment, as if she could not immediately digest this fact. Lang Jun, you mean that today you actually... I haven't put this idea into action yet. I'm just thinking about it in my mind. Huang Song looked slightly tipsy. He shook his head and said, I'm not as good as Lanting in this regard. If I brought 5,000 elites with me today, what awaited me would definitely be a banquet at Hongmen that was filled with killing intent and no chance of survival. She has nothing to worry about. I can't do that. If I dare to do anything else, she can crush my neck first. The scene of Zhang Pengji dismembering a living person with a ceremonial tablet in the court left a deep impression on him. He would occasionally have nightmares about that scene. Of course, if the banquet at Hongmen was effective, Huang Song would not miss this opportunity. He did not make a move. It was precisely because of what Zhang Pengji had said. Firstly, he was not confident. Secondly, he had concerns. The next day, Feng Ju and Ye Sun came over early in the morning to take attendance. Where is Meng Zhan being locked up at the moment? Zhang Pengji did her morning exercise as usual, then brushed her teeth, washed up, and changed her clothes. She looked refreshed. Feng Ju cupped his hands and said, Meng Zhan is locked up in the dungeon. I'll go and see him myself. Zhang Pengji glanced at him and pointed at two people. Zixiao, Shurjiu, you two follow me. Li Yun volunteered. My lord is traveling alone outside. The two gentlemen are not very skilled in martial arts. I hope my lord will allow me to follow you. Chapter 1079. Feng Ju and Ye Sun remained silent. Zhang Pengji said, What danger could there be in Bogeo? If you insist, let Officer Meng follow. My lord? Li Yun hesitated and stole a glance at Meng Hun, who had a complicated look on his face. He took a step back. Meng Hun cupped his fists at Li Yun, his eyes filled with gratitude. Before leaving, Meng Heng looked at Zhang Pengji hesitantly with a pleading look in his eyes. No matter how Meng Zhan treated him, they were father and son. Meng Heng could ignore Meng Zhan's life and death, but he didn't want to see him die. But Zhang Pengji didn't agree. We are father and son. Send him on his way. Meng Heng said, Yes. Nye Sun heard the conversation and felt a chill in his heart. Was this person forcing Meng Heng to kill his own father? Feng Ju said, The dungeon is dark and damp. Why don't we get someone to bring the prisoner out? No, I'll go see for myself. I haven't seen what the dungeon looks like. Just as Feng Ju said, the environment in the dungeon was terrible. The air was filled with stinky water vapor and there were rats scurrying in the dark. The temperature in the dungeon was much lower than outside. As soon as they stepped into the dungeon, a gust of chilly air hit them in the face, making them uncomfortable. Zhang Pengji walked in front without changing her expression. Feng Ju led her to a relatively large and clean cell in the dungeon. Meng Zhan's life is not bad. I thought he would suffer a lot in the dungeon. The area of the cell was very large, about 100 square meters. There was a mattress, a tea table, a dining table, and a bowl. Feng Ju asked the cell to open the door. The commotion alerted Meng Zhan in the cell. When he heard Zhang Pengji's voice, he guessed who it was. It was funny. He had hated Lu Shi and his daughter for many years and had been thinking of ways to take revenge, but he hadn't even seen the person in question. Uncle Meng, this is the first time we've met, right? Jiang Pengji gestured for Feng Ju and the others to step back and avoid her conversation with Meng Zhan. Only Meng Hun stayed by her side to protect her. Meng Zhan's white hair was combed neatly. His cheeks were washed with warm water. There was no grease or dirt. He looked much more energetic than before. But he had aged too fast. His face was an unhealthy gray color and his eyes were sunken. He looked old and pitiful. Although he wasn't in good spirits, his appearance was well. A jade crown hung high above his head, and a jet-green scholarly robe was worn on his body. His back was straight, and one could barely see the scholarly elegance of his youth. Meng Zhan raised his head and squinted his eyes. He looked at Jiang Pengji carefully. "How dare you call me Uncle Meng? Although Uncle Meng has cut off all ties with my father, you are my aunt's ex-husband. Calling him uncle is a courtesy that a junior should have." Zhan, I said. Jiang is Peng Zhan B. Is Jiang Meng Zhan. Meng B, Meng said. Meng said, was she? Was. As her son, how could I not be angry? He was my father's second wife and my mother's sister. She was not only my father's second wife, but she was also my mother's sister. I couldn't let your son bully her. Besides, Meng Zhan and his friends used disguise to sneak into the backyard of the people in Hejian. They raped innocent women. Meng Zhan deserved to die. Meng Zhan's expression changed when Gu Zhan was mentioned, but he quickly calmed down. So what? My son is naughty. He just needs to change. I, his father, will teach him a lesson. Meng Zhan and his friends used disguise to sneak into other people's backyard to bully women. It was nothing new. Meng Zhan had cleaned up his mess for him many times. He was angry at his son's behavior, but what could he do? He was the only child in the family. Who else could he protect if not him? Jiang Pengji was so angry that she laughed. Did you say something in the living room? Meng Zhan raised his eyebrows. What? If you can't discipline your son, don't blame others for teaching him a lesson. I thought Meng Zhan was hopeless, so I sent him on his way. Do you know how I killed Meng Zhan? I cut open his wrist and let him bleed to death. Even though Meng Zhan had a good temperament, he couldn't hold back his anger when the enemy who killed his son talked about how he killed his son. Are you angry? Jiang Pengji smiled. I have more to say. Do you want to hear it? Meng Zhan sneered. You are indeed the daughter of Lu Shi and Gu Min Gu Zhan's stepdaughter. You are indeed vicious and shameless. I am no match for you. If I had 10% of Uncle Meng's skills, I would have no regrets. The atmosphere was tense. Meng Hun stared at Meng Zhan, his former boss, with murderous eyes. He didn't expect Meng Zhan to not repent after so many years. Meng Zhan's son was a son, but his wife and children were not human? Lu Lanting, did you come here just to argue with me? Meng Zhan sneered. His face was full of wrinkles, but his eyes were full of vigor. If this is all you've got, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't embarrass yourself in front of me. Jiang Pengji crossed her arms and sat opposite Meng Zhan. She said, It's not that I don't want to, but I'm afraid Uncle Meng can't take it. Meng Zhan's face darkened. Meng Heng and the others stood far away. They couldn't hear what Jiang Pengji and Meng Zhan were saying, but the atmosphere was worrisome. Uncle Meng, you have a problem with your body. It's hard for you to impregnate a woman, right? Jiang Pengji changed her sitting posture and sneered indifferently. What are you trying to say? This is related to a man's dignity. Of course, I have to keep it a secret. Apart from you and your trusted doctor, no one else knows about it. Jiang Pengji ignored him and continued, When my aunt married you, she was ambushed by a group of bandits. She was saved in the end, and the wedding went on as planned. However, the bride didn't bleed that night. Uncle Meng helped to cover it up. Meng Zhan could listen calmly at first, but the more he listened, the more he felt something was wrong. Only he knew the details of what happened that year, but Jiang Pengji described it in detail as if she had seen it with her own eyes. After a month, my aunt was found to be pregnant. She got pregnant on the night of her wedding. Uncle Meng was not confident because of his health. You also saw my aunt being intimate with someone, so you started to doubt the lineage of the baby in her womb. Meng Zhan interrupted her with a cold smile. It's not doubt. Meng Heng, that bastard, is not mine. He would never forget the shame of being cuckolded. His new wife had an affair with someone else. He suddenly sighed. It's a pity. Jiang Pengji frowned. What's a pity? Meng Zhan's face flashed with fierceness. It's a pity that the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was published too late. If it was 20 or 30 years earlier. Before the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was published, society was still very open. It was not a big deal for a woman to keep a man. Losing her virginity before marriage was not a serious matter. At most, people would gossip about her, but it would not kill her. Chapter 1080. He didn't expect Gu Zhan to treasure the bastard so much. It made Meng Zhan feel like he was slapped in the face. After that, Meng Heng took the title of the eldest son and took the position of the Mengs. Bastard? Did he deserve it? Sigh. It's a pity for me too. Meng Zhan's eyebrows twitched. He wanted to hear what kind of tricks this person in front of him had. Do you really think Cousin Heng isn't your son? My aunt doesn't have a second man except for you. Whether it was before or after marriage, or after divorce, she never betrayed you. Even when she married my father, the two of them maintained their original relationship. Jiang Pengji smiled. Moreover, do you know who wrote the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women? If you knew who she was, you would skin her alive and drink her blood. Why would it be a pity? Meng Zhan didn't believe her. He sneered. You should ask Gu Zhan if she has the guts to accept it. Meng Zhan believed his eyes. Gu Zhan was the only woman he loved and hated. She betrayed him again and again. Did she really think he was afraid of the Gus and the Lus? Of course she has the guts to accept it. I'm just afraid you don't have the courage to admit your mistake. Meng Zhan was a confident and stubborn person. He had a typical trait. He wouldn't shed a tear in front of a coffin. He wouldn't turn back even if he broke the wall. He wouldn't believe that he was wrong. He would only believe in the information he deduced. If she killed Meng Zhan without doing anything, he would still die for her because in his heart, he wasn't wrong. If so, Jiang Pengji would shatter his confidence with solid evidence. She would show him who was wrong. Meng Zhan was so angry that he laughed. His face looked twisted and weird. He said in a cold tone, "Ignorant boy. Your dirty tricks aren't even as good as your father. Kill me if you want. Cut me if you want. If I take a step back, let me be struck by lightning." For the literati of this era, there were always things above their lives. Meng Zhan wasn't afraid of death. Jiang Pengji looked at Meng Zhan's face seriously and said, I can take any loss, but I can't take any loss. Can't afford to lose? She said. Meng Zhan's wrinkled face flashed with a trace of mockery. You still can't afford to lose. Other than being stubborn, he didn't seem to have anything else to rely on. Meng Zhan wasn't afraid at all. Meng Zhan originally wanted to reorganize the troops in Cangzhou and fight the last battle. He couldn't let Jiang Pengji take Cangzhou so easily. After some consideration, he gave up on this plan and gave Cangzhou to Huang Song. At the same time, he promised benefits to the Nye family of Zhongzhou and the Yi family of Beiyuan. He wanted to use the two families to restrain Jiang Pengji and make her worry. She would not be able to go all out and settle scores with Huang Song. No arrogant person would be able to tolerate such a humiliating trick and scheme. But she had no choice but to bear this loss, unless she disregarded the bigger picture and courted death on a whim. No matter how strong she was, she wouldn't be able to survive a large-scale war. He had not recovered from the battle at the northern borderline. How could she withstand the combined pressure of the Nye clan and the Yi clan? Meng Zhan was fearless because he knew all this. Jiang Pengji crooked her finger at Meng Zhan. Her tone suddenly turned cold. I have something to say to you. Meng Zhan, you old man. Remember this even when you are in front of the king of hell. Anyone who makes me suffer, I will make him suffer 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Jiang Pengji had experienced all kinds of situations in her 2 lives. From a lowly and insignificant genetic warrior to a commander with military power. Did he really think she got there with her fists? Meng Zhan was not bad. He made her suffer without saying a word. But, did Meng Zhan think about her revenge before he did it? Meng Zhan didn't feel angry when he heard her bold words. Instead, he laughed his head off. He hadn't been this happy since Meng Liang died. I'll be waiting. Jiang Pengji curled her lips and turned to Meng Hun. who was trying hard to control himself. Captain Meng, you can leave. Call Sergio and Chung Yun here. Meng Hun hesitated, but he couldn't disobey Jiang Pengji's order. Yes. Meng Zhan was stunned when he heard the name, Sergio. It took him a while to realize it was his eldest son, Meng Hung. When Meng Hun walked out of the cell, Jiang Pengji said meaningfully, Meng Zhan, open your eyes and see what you've done all these years. Meng Zhan didn't care, but he soon lost his composure. He opened his eyes wide in shock, which reflected his feelings at the moment. What sorcery is this? The dark cell was suddenly lit up. Meng Zhan subconsciously covered his eyes with his hands. It took him a while to get used to the sudden light. When he put down his sleeves, the environment around him suddenly changed. He ran from the dark cell to the main hall of the luxurious mansion. Looking at the decorations around him, he realized many of the furnishings were for the royal family. While he was confused, he saw a man in luxurious clothes flirting with two maids. He was about to put his hand on one of the maids' breasts. At that moment, a cold snort came from nowhere. Humph! You're still messing around here? Meng Zhan was frightened to see a red figure suddenly appear in the place where there was no one. This person was extremely beautiful. Her face was covered with gorgeous makeup, which made her look very flirtatious. This person's appearance could be called peerless seductress. The man who was standing before saluted in fear. Mother. Mother? Meng Zhan's expression didn't change. He calmly analyzed the identity of the two. As the man and the woman talked, Meng Zhan realized their identity with cold sweat. One was Wu Ma Jun, the fourth prince of Dongqing, and the other was Wang Gui Fei, who had died 800 years ago. Just when he was panicking, he heard a voice that made him clench his teeth in disgust and hatred. Yo, you really have 9 lives. Last time I broke your neck, but it didn't kill you. Now you're alive again. The cynical voice came from outside the door. Meng Zhan followed the voice and found that Lu Shi couldn't see him. No, she wasn't Lu Shi. Meng Zhan quickly found that the Lu Shi he saw was more immature than the one he saw before. Vaguely, he had a guess. Everything in front of him was fake. It was most likely someone's memory. As for who that person was, Meng Zhan had already guessed it. He ate vegetarian and prayed to the Buddha, but he didn't believe in such things. Instead, he scoffed at it. But when he saw the unnatural phenomenon with his own eyes, he had to believe it. Meng Zhan calmed down. He wanted to see what Jiang Pengji was up to. The woman in red, Wu Ma Jun, and the immature Lu Shi couldn't see Meng Zhan. They talked among themselves. The more Meng Zhan listened, the more shocked he became. When he learned that Lu Shi adopted Lu Huan and pushed her and Wu Ma Jun to have sex with each other, he laughed. Lu Shi, you aren't any more arrogant than me. Lu Shi was a cruel and merciless person to come up with such a plan. But that was between Lu Shi and the devil. It had nothing to do with him. Chapter 1081. Meng Zhan had never thought that the truth could be so cruel. Yes, I did all these things. At least I am brave enough to take responsibility for what I did. I am better than those whores who pretend to be innocent. The woman in red was emotional. Don't think that you are so noble. Go back to your mother's grave and ask her how she was. She stole her brother-in-law and pushed her sister to Meng Zhan. Now look at how Meng Zhan treated Gu Zhen. She deserved to be avenged. There was too much information in this sentence. What did she mean by Gu Min stole Lu Shi? Meng Zhan was the one who had proposed Gu Zhen's marriage. He had even heard Lu Shi complain about Gu Min's concern for Gu Zhen's marriage. More importantly, Gu Min had listed many talents in Dongqing, but she only had strong opinions about Meng Zhan. She had never considered him. If Meng Zhan hadn't asked for Gu Zhen's hand in marriage and talked to Lu Shi, the marriage might not have happened. Thinking about the strange experience of the woman in red, a scary thought spread in his mind. His mind was racing. The conversation between the woman in red and the young Lu Shi was still going on. My father said that Meng Zhan was a gentleman. When he married my stepmother, he promised to treat her well. But after a few years of marriage, Meng Zhan went against his promise. I don't doubt my father's judgment. He and Meng Zhan were best friends. There was no conflict of interest between them. Meng Zhan didn't have to lie to him. So what did you do? Meng Zhan suddenly remembered the promise he made when he was young. He fell in love with Gu Zhan at first sight. He could still remember the scene in the Lu mansion. He couldn't forget it even in the middle of the night. So what if she was the daughter of a concubine? Except for her low birth, Gu Zhan met all the requirements to be the wife of the Mengs. Meng Zhan was young and aggressive. He wanted to marry someone he liked. Meng Zhan hadn't recovered from the memory when the woman in red's voice exploded in his ears. Gu Zhen's wedding night didn't fall. In order to help her gain a foothold in her maiden family, I gave her a congratulatory gift so that she could have a child in one night. Meng Zhan clenched his fists. The young Lu Shi asked what was on his mind. And then, on the night before Gu Zhen's wedding, she was ambushed by a small group of bandits on the way to the wedding. In the end, it was a close shave, but there were rumors that Gu Zhan had lost her virginity to the bandits. The wedding was just around the corner, so it was impossible for it to fail. You also know that men care a lot about things like falling red. There was no red on the wedding night. Meng Zhan wanted to endure it, but Gu Zhan got pregnant on the first night of the wedding. So, who does this child belong to? Meng Zhan didn't dare to listen anymore. Wasn't the child they had on their wedding night Meng Hang? He didn't want to listen, but the person in the scene couldn't stop. Lu Shi continued to ask, "Did you also do something to the stepmother's second child?" The red-clothed woman shamelessly admitted it. Meng Zhan has seen Gu Zhan fooling around with the servants in the mansion. How could he not hate her? Stepmother would never do such a thing. Hearing this, Meng Zhan gritted his teeth. How could Gu Zhan not do such a thing? He had seen it with his own eyes, so how could it be false? The woman in red smiled sweetly and covered her red lips with her fingers. Transfiguration pills are good stuff. Transfiguration pills? Hearing the name, Meng Zhan could guess what it was used for. He couldn't stop being shocked. No, this was fake. Lu Shi knew sorcery. How hard could it be to fabricate a scene? Meng Zhan roared in his heart over and over again. All of this was Lu Shi's trick. It wasn't real. He was terrified. He didn't want to admit that he was wrong. He didn't wrong Gu Zhen. The more he thought about it, the more memories came into his mind. He couldn't ignore it. He remembered how much Gu Zhen loved Meng Hang. Every time he showed a little bit of disgust, she always showed a heartbroken expression. The husband and wife had tortured each other for years. Gu Zhen became more and more quiet and cold. She was like a lifeless dead wood. It annoyed him. How could a woman who had betrayed him show an expression that he hurt her? Don't you have only yourself to blame for all this? If you were willing to trust her a little bit, let go of your arrogance and dominance, and talk to your aunt, all these misunderstandings could be solved. The 4 Self-Accomplishment Classics for Women was written by that evil woman in red. She first took over Wang Huiyun's body and used it to stir up trouble. In the end, she took over Empress Du's body and wrote the 4 Self-Accomplishment Classics for Women, which made you sigh that it was too late. What do you think? Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Is it exciting? Jiang Pengji appeared in front of Meng Zhan. But you can't blame the monster for what happened. You, Meng Zhan, have to take half of the responsibility. Even if it didn't happen, you are still a scumbag. Think about what you have done over the years. Which one of them is good? Jiang Pengji continued to provoke him. As the leader of the Mengs, when have you ever treated the people in Song Prefecture well? You allowed your son of a concubine to commit crimes everywhere. He hurt the loyal and innocent, and he raped women and children. He even wanted to hurt his own mother. Isn't that what your father taught him? Meng Zhan endured the pain in his head and shouted angrily. Shut up! Do you still remember Meng Hun? He has been loyal to you and the Mengs for so many years. Your son of a concubine harmed his wife and daughter. Not only did you not help him, but you also protected the concubine and harmed Meng Hun. How can you treat him? If it weren't for you and your son of a concubine, he would not have caused chaos in Meng County. Cousin Heng looks a little like you. Are you blind? The more Meng Zhan did not allow Jiang Pengji to speak, the more she wanted to speak. He wanted her to suffer, didn't he? She would make Meng Zhan wish he was dead. Speaking of Cousin Heng, I forgot the son your aunt gave birth to. He was a baby boy with a cinnabar mole between his eyebrows. He was the second son of the Mengs, but your son of a concubine took his place under your control. He was buried in the cold mud by the servant woman when he was less than a month old. Meng Zhan, you killed your son of a concubine. You doted on Meng Liang like he was a treasure, but Meng Heng as a Zongzi was dragged down by you and your father to the point that he failed the assessment. The second son of the first wife, who had a strange phenomenon, was buried underground. It was rare to see someone who could harm their son to such an extent. Next, it's time for the main course. Jiang Pengji said it so softly that Meng Zhan could not hear it. In the spiritual realm, Meng Zhan saw a part of Jiang Pengji's memory. It seemed like a long time had passed, but in fact, it was only a short while. Meng Hun asked Meng Heng and Ye Sun to go over. They had different thoughts. Feng Ju, who was at the side, became suspicious. Jiang Pengji asked Meng Heng to go over. It was easy. Meng Heng was Meng Zhan's son. Why did she ask Ye Sun to go over? Feng Ju secretly glanced at Ye Sun. The other party's expression made him even more suspicious. Chapter 1082. Meng Heng stood behind Jiang Pengji and looked at Meng Zhan with a complicated expression. No boy didn't look forward to their father. Meng Heng used to look up to Meng Zhan like a god when he was young. But Meng Zhan only had eyes for his son, Meng Liang. Even if Meng Liang was useless and lustful, Meng Zhan still spoiled him like a treasure. Meng Heng had once thought that Meng Zhan liked this kind of son, so he had tried to be like Meng Liang. He had secretly tried to be like Meng Liang, but he was severely punished and ordered to kneel in the ancestral hall. It was winter. It was raining heavily outside. The air was so cold that it felt like there were blades in it. Meng Heng didn't wear much clothing. He knelt until his knees were black and swollen. He almost died. That memory became his childhood nightmare. Occasionally, when he dreamed about it in the middle of the night, he could still clearly remember the cold air that filled the air. Meng Heng looked down and bowed to Jiang Pengji calmly. My lord, why did you call me here? No matter what, you and Meng Zhan were father and son. I'm not an unreasonable person. I don't want you to have any regrets, so I'll allow you to have a word with him. You and your son can make a clean break. Jiang Pengji said, Meng Zhan still owes Captain Meng a debt. Meng Heng was stunned. It took him a while to realize what she meant. Jiang Pengji didn't want him to send Meng Zhan to hell. She just wanted him to talk to Meng Zhan so he wouldn't have any regrets? He felt relieved. He couldn't tell how he felt. Thank you, my lord, Meng Heng said. Meng Liang was the direct murderer of Meng Hun's wife and daughter, but Meng Zhan was also an accomplice. Meng Heng had no right to stop or resent her. Jiang Pengji stood up and walked to the door of the cell. She turned her head and whispered, his emotions aren't stable. Don't get too close. Jiang Pengji made way for Meng Heng, but she didn't go too far. This distance wouldn't make Meng Heng feel like he was being watched. It also wouldn't let the situation get out of her control. Meng Heng's eyebrows relaxed after Jiang Pengji left. He saw Ye Sun standing on the side and became suspicious. What was Ye Sun doing there? He didn't think further because he was pressed for time. Father, Patriarch Meng. Meng Heng sat on the mat and bit the tip of his tongue, forcing himself to swallow back the honorific that slipped out of his mouth. He had already been expelled from his sect, and he had cut off all ties with Meng Zhan. If he called him father now, Meng Zhan might not even acknowledge him. Meng Zhan was immersed in his own world. He was on the verge of breaking down. When he suddenly heard someone calling him, he became more alert. When he looked up, he saw Meng Heng's face. Meng Zhan was so agitated that he couldn't control his emotions. He jumped forward with a ferocious face and half of his body crossed the short table. Meng Shurjiu. Meng Zhan's face looked ferocious as he shouted Meng Zhan's full name. His skinny hands grabbed Meng Heng's sleeves. Why are you still alive? Why is Meng Shurjiu the one who died? How could a bastard like you be my son? Meng Heng was scared out of his wits. He wanted to struggle, but Meng Zhan's scream made him feel like he had fallen into an ice cellar. It was as if all the sounds around him had faded away. What did it mean to be a bastard? Meng Heng didn't struggle. Instead, it gave Meng Zhan a chance to go further. He didn't believe what Jiang Pengji had said. It must have been an illusion created by her witchcraft. Everything was to deceive him. He couldn't have done anything wrong after all these years. Meng Heng was a bastard of Gu Zhan and someone else. He wasn't his son at all. Meng Zhan only had one son in his life. His only son was killed by Lu Shi. The bastard that he had raised for more than 20 years had turned to Lu Shi. He didn't care about Meng Liang's blood feud. How could you be my son? Meng Zhan looked thin and weak, but the power he had was terrifying. Meng Heng didn't have time to react. He grabbed his neck and couldn't get away. Nie Sun was also shocked by Meng Zhan's words. When he came back to his senses, Meng Heng's face had turned green. Without hesitation, Nie Sun kicked Meng Zhan's shoulder. Meng Zhan screamed in pain and let go of his hands. Meng Heng's eyes were filled with tears. His eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't believe it. Was this the reason why Meng Zhan had hated him for so many years? Meng Zhan was the first to react. He pulled out the sword on Meng Heng's waist and stabbed at Meng Heng with the shiny blade. In a flash, Nie Sun didn't have time to think. He grabbed Meng Heng and the two of them rolled together to avoid the sword. Meng Zhan was the first to react. He pulled out the sword on Meng Heng's waist and stabbed at Meng Heng with the shiny blade. Meng Zhan had lost his mind. Seeing that Meng Heng had escaped, he followed up with another attack. You are crazy! Nie Sun blocked with the body of his sword. He had underestimated Meng Zhan's strength and the sword almost fell out of his hand. Kill this bastard. It's all a lie. He is a bastard. Meng Zhan's eyes were red. His old face was twisted and hideous. Nie Sun had stopped him from killing Meng Heng, so he would kill Nie Sun as well. How dare you stop me? You deserve to die. Meng Zhan couldn't control his emotions. All kinds of messy thoughts were about to burst his brain. Die. Scholars in ancient times all learned the 6 arts of gentlemen. Meng Zhan had learned swordsmanship as well. At this moment, he wanted to kill Nie Sun and Meng Heng with no regard for his life. Every move was aimed at the Achilles heel. Nie Sun's left arm was cut. Watch out! Meng Heng regained his composure. He saw Meng Zhan's sword was about to stab Nie Sun's chest. He didn't care and rushed to grab Meng Zhan's legs. Meng Zhan's movement was blocked, so the sword in his hand missed. The tip of the sword went into Nie Sun's shoulder, and Nie Sun's sword went into Meng Zhan's chest. Everything happened so fast. When Wei Ci and the others realized what had happened and rushed over, it was already too late. With a clang, the sword in Meng Zhan's hand fell to the ground. Nie Sun was also shocked. He let go of the sword that was covered in sticky blood. Although the sword didn't hit the heart, it was still a vital part. Even if the doctor could get here, Meng Zhan would still die. The pain in his chest suppressed the swelling pain in his head. His mind slowly came back and his hideous face softened. Jiu. Meng Zhan opened his mouth but his tone was calm. Meng Heng was still in a daze. He let go of his hands and held Meng Zhan's body. The sticky and glaring blood rushed into his eyes. He was out of his wits. His pale lips were trembling. He said, Meng. Master Meng? Meng Zhan heard the name. His pale face showed a trace of mockery and tiredness. His chest was hurting. He lowered his head and looked at the direction of the sword. He looked at the young man who put the tip of the sword into his body. He was about 25 or 26 years old, with a handsome face and a bright red cinnabar mole between his eyebrows. That face? That cinnabar mole? Suddenly, Jiang Pengji's words rang in his head. Chapter 1083. You dote on Meng Liang like she's a treasure. Who was Meng Liang? He was the son of a concubine in the Meng's family. Because of Meng Zhan's favoritism, he took the title of the legitimate son. The voice in his head refused to let him go, clearly pointing out what stupid thing he had done. As a Zongzi, Meng Heng was dragged down by you father and son to the point that he failed the assessment. When Meng Zhan thought of this, his already uncomfortable chest hurt even more. It was as if a hand was squeezing his heart, trying to crush it. Meng Zhan was in so much pain that he couldn't even open his mouth. His face was drained of color, and his hands and feet were as cold as ice. Putting aside all prejudice and enmity, Meng Heng was indeed an outstanding Zongzi. He was gentle, elegant, and meticulous. Even if he couldn't bring the Meng family further, he wouldn't lose the support of the people like he did. Because of his indifference,
The lowly concubine who gave birth to Meng Liang was promoted to a noble concubine and had the authority of a lady.
As the eldest son, Meng Hang was in a difficult situation.
Under such circumstances, the young Meng Hang was still able to find a way out for himself and go to Shangjing to study.
Now that she thought about it, it was indeed extraordinary. Unfortunately, Meng Zhan had always thought that Meng Hang was a bastard. He thought that Meng Hang was proof that Gu Zhan had betrayed him. He didn't like him at all. If the family elders hadn't forced him to make Meng Hang the Zongzi, he might not have hated this child so much. The Mengs were a big family. How could they lack Meng Hang's food? However, Meng Hang had become the Zongzi and occupied a position that did not belong to him. The better Meng Hang behaved, the more Meng Liang looked like mud in comparison, the more Meng Zhan hated him. He saw Meng Hang as a disgrace that could never be erased. Meng Zhan suddenly remembered what Jiang Pengji said. Gu Zhan's second son, that second legitimate son, was really dead? Meng Zhan's face was sweating from the pain. His vision started to blur, but he still kept his eyes wide open and stared at Nie Sun. How could he forget this face? Nie Sun's appearance was extremely similar to Gu Zhan when she was young. He was full of vigor, and his eyebrows were in high spirits. It was unforgettable at a glance. The cinnabar mole between her eyebrows was bright red and round, as if it wanted to draw in all the gazes of others. At that moment, Meng Zhan guessed Nie Sun's identity. There was a bitter taste in his mouth, and an indescribable emotion wrapped around his heart and lungs. Although he didn't know Nie Sun's name, judging from his demeanor, he wasn't an ordinary person. Who would have thought? The two sons that he had abandoned with his own hands were both dragons and phoenixes among men. The bastard son that he had doted on like a jewel was actually useless. Retribution. This was retribution. Is this your revenge? Meng Zhan was supported by Meng Hang, but he did not look at his eldest son. Instead, he stared at Nie Sun's face, as if he was trying to see someone through his face. His voice was trembling and choked with sobs. Is this revenge on me? Is this what you want to see? Only then did Nie Sun come back to his senses. He stared blankly at his blood-stained hands. The blood was stuck to his skin, and some parts of his hands had already dried up. His heart was beating violently, and he was so flustered that he felt uncomfortable. His hands, which could burn incense and play the zither, were trembling uncontrollably. It wasn't that Nie Sun hadn't killed before, but he never thought he would kill Meng Zhan. His usually quick-witted brain was now like a rusty gear. Every time it turned, it would make a jerky, ear-piercing sound. Nie Sun's lips were trembling as he shouted to the side, "Doctor, get the doctor here!" Meng Hang heard him and secretly clenched his fists. He peeked at Jiang Pengji, who was standing outside the crowd. It was not just because of the distance, but also because of something else. He could not see her expression clearly. "Fine. Cough, cough, forget it." Meng Zhan coughed weakly, and his lips curved into a sarcastic smile. Even when he was on the verge of death, he could quickly analyze that it was a trap. Jiang Pengji knew everything. Not only did she know about the past, but she also knew Nie Sun's identity. If not, why would she let Nie Sun and Meng Hang appear together in front of him? He had heard that Lu Shi's martial arts were superior, and that he could take the head of the enemy's general in the midst of an army of 10,000. With such skills, how could she not react to the situation just now? He was afraid that the situation was exactly what she wanted to see. She forced him to lose control of his emotions, tempted him to hurt Meng Hang, and finally let Nie Sun kill him. He. It was indeed a vicious plan. Lu Shi had no idea what kind of vicious daughter he had given birth to. At that moment, Meng Zhan finally saw how terrifying Jiang Pengji was. He felt a little scared. Wasn't she afraid that her plan would fail and that Meng Hang or Nie Sun would be hurt by him? Meng Zhan moved his eyes with difficulty, trying to find Jiang Pengji's figure. He was caught off guard and met her cold eyes. Jiang Pengji looked at him coldly, and her thin lips curled up. "Hurry up and call the doctor." Nie Sun clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. "Magistrate Lu," Jiang Pengji said indifferently, "it's too late. We can't save him." Nie Sun lost control of his emotions. He gritted his teeth and said, "How do you know it won't work if you don't try? If he doesn't die now, he will die in a few days. What's the difference between dying earlier or later?" Jiang Pengji looked down at Nie Sun coldly. No, Nye Qingyun, there is a difference. Meng Zhan can die in the hands of anyone, but he can't. Before Jiang Pengji could finish her sentence, Meng Zhan, who was on the verge of death, suddenly pushed Meng Heng away. He held the sword in front of his chest with both of his hands and pushed it into his body. The blood that had just stopped gushing out like it was free. Lu Shi, how dare you? His eyes were wide open. Tiny cracks appeared at the corners of his eyes and beads of blood seeped out. The expression on his face was as terrifying as that of a ferocious ghost. After 2 breaths, there was a bang. Meng Zhan's skinny body fell to the side. He didn't rest in peace until his death. Everyone was shocked by the turn of events. They were all smart people. How could they not notice the strangeness of Meng Zhan's last move? He used up the last of his strength to interrupt Jiang Pengji. He must be hiding something. Feng Ju glanced around calmly. From Jiang Pengji to Meng Heng, and then to Nye Sun, what secret did the 3 of them hide? Even if Jiang Pengji didn't finish her sentence, Feng Ju could finish it. Meng Zhan could die in the hands of anyone, but what couldn't he? Connecting the dots, the most likely possibility was. But he couldn't die in the hands of Nye Sun. A scary thought rose in his heart. Feng Ju's expression changed again. He looked at Nye Sun with a complicated gaze. No one spoke until Meng Hun broke the tense atmosphere. Although Meng Zhan has done many evil things, he is dead. Let's write off all the grudges he had when he was alive. Meng Zhan's life should have been left for him to reap. However, Meng Zhan's death in front of him could be considered as revenge. The page was turned over. Meng Heng's reaction was slow. When Meng Hun finished speaking, he said with a dry voice, "I beg my lord to allow me to collect his body. Although he deserved it, I had a father-son relationship with him for more than 20 years. I can't bear to see him die in the wilderness." Chapter 1084. Meng Heng stayed behind to collect Meng Zhan's body. Jiang Pengji left with the others, leaving Meng Heng alone. Everyone left except for Nye Sun. Meng Heng knelt until his knees were numb. It took him a while to regain his composure. From the corner of his eyes, he saw Nye Sun, whose expression he could not see clearly. "Cheng Yun, your arm is still injured. It's not suitable for you to stay in the damp and cold dungeon." He put Meng Zhan's cold body on the ground, opened his hands that were holding the sword, and uncurled his fingers one by one. Only then did Nye Sun return to his senses. His throat emitted a sound like that of a wild beast, as if he was suppressing a strong emotion. "Wow!" Nye Sun supported himself against the wall with his uninjured right hand and retched in discomfort. Meng Heng raised his hand and closed Nye Sun's eyes. He didn't seem to notice Nye Sun's abnormal reaction. "What's your relationship with the Meng family?" Nye Sun wiped the remaining stain on the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand and panted. "I'm from the Nye family of Zhongzhao's Bian Prefecture. How could I be related to the Meng family? The head of the Meng family committed suicide, and Cheng Yun accidentally injured him in order to protect him. None of this is your fault." Meng Heng's hand paused as if he was relieved. "It's all thanks to Cheng Yun's help today. Otherwise, the one lying on the ground right now would be hung." Nye Sun looked at Meng Heng's back with a complicated gaze. His usually straight back was now slightly bent. It was sad to see him all alone. "I thought that Lu Prefecture Magistrate was a sentimental person, but after this incident, I realized that I was wrong, very wrong." Nye Sun left the dungeon and was not surprised to see Jiang Pengji. He stepped forward and said, "Magistrate Lu, aren't you afraid of falling out with Xueqi by doing this? This is already the best situation. Cousin Heng is a smart man. He knows what's best for him." Jiang Pengji smiled. "Meng Zhan's life can't be saved. If his death can be exchanged for the rest of the Mengs, wouldn't that be wonderful? Logically speaking, even if Meng Heng didn't hate her, there would still be some animosity between them. What was the price of doing so? The Meng family had no one to protect them. Meng Heng was generous and gentle, but that didn't mean he was a sentimental person. On the contrary, he was calm and rational. Meng Zhan is Cousin Heng's biological father, but the father-son relationship between them has been eroded by Meng Zhan." Jiang Pengji looked at Nye Sun calmly and smiled. "People's hearts are complicated, but they are also simple. If Cousin Heng wants to blame me, I have nothing to say. When Nye-soon heard this, his Adam's apple bobbed a few times. He looked at Jiang Pengji with some shock. Why, you've guessed my identity, haven't you? Nye-soon was almost sure that Jiang Pengji knew the truth. I'm afraid you don't know, but your face is very similar to my Shu aunt's. Many years ago, my aunt told me that her son, who died prematurely, was born with a cinnabar mole between his eyebrows. Jiang Pengji smiled. When I first saw you, I thought your face looked familiar. Later, I heard from Bogeo that you came to Dongqing to look for your relatives, and I began to suspect you. But I don't have any evidence, so I'm not sure. It wasn't until cousin Heng escaped from Congzhou and you took extra care of him that I could be sure. What? Do you admire Meng Zhan? Nye-soon gritted his teeth and said, How is that possible? Meng Zhan didn't raise him, and he was cruel enough to let his illegitimate son take over his identity. He buried him, who was less than a month old, in the cold underground. If he had been a little unlucky, he would have lost his life long ago. To him, Meng Zhan was just a stranger who was related by blood. Jiang Pengji sneered. If that's the case, isn't it even more unreasonable for you to blame me? Nye-soon choked and couldn't speak. After a while, Nye-soon looked at his hands. The blood on them had dried up. You plotted to kill your father. Isn't the magistrate of Liuzhou afraid of revenge? Jiang Pengji said, You and I are on opposing sides. I have so many enemies. It doesn't matter if you're here or not. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. If one day I become your prisoner, you can take my life as you wish. After saying that, Jiang Pengji walked past Nye-soon and left without looking back.
She didn't walk far before she saw a familiar figure standing at the end of the long street from afar.
Warmth rose in her heart. She didn't need others to understand her, but if someone was willing to open their hearts to her, that would be the biggest gain. It was a special time, and Meng Zhan was a prisoner. His funeral had to be simple. But when Meng Zhan's coffin was buried, Meng Hang had lost a lot of weight. His clothes that fit him looked empty. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, no one from the Mengs came to the funeral. The funeral procession looked sparse and desolate. If Wei Ci, Feng Zhan, and the others hadn't attended the funeral for Meng Hung, it would have been even more desolate. Jiang Pengji didn't attend, but without her secret support, Meng Zhan's mourning hall would have been smashed by the people of Meng County. I wonder what good things Meng Zhan did in his past life. He's done so many bad things in this life, but he still has a good son to send him off. Meng Hun's revenge was avenged, but the knot in his heart wasn't so easily resolved. If nothing had happened to his wife and daughter, he would have a grandson by now and become a happy and peaceful father-in-law. Feng Zhan smiled as he poured wine for Meng Hun and filled up his own goblet. Officer Meng, why don't you have another wife? You've already avenged your wife and niece. It's time for you to move on. The dead are gone, but the living are like this. They can only rest in peace if you live a good life. Meng Hun shook his head. He didn't want to have another wife. He just wanted to be loyal to his lord and repay him for saving his life. Feng Zhan said casually, Meng Zhan is dead. The grudge from back then has finally come to an end. Meng Hun snorted and put down the goblet. Sure, you don't have to beat around the bush. I'm a rough guy. Just say what you want to say. Feng Zhen didn't feel awkward. Instead, he smiled. Since Officer Meng has spoken, I'll speak the truth. The trouble Meng Zhan caused shouldn't involve his children. My lord will treat the Meng's branch family lightly. I'm letting you know about this in case you feel uncomfortable. Plus, Xueqi is my lord's cousin. He's talented and will be put in an important position in the future. Officer Meng and him. It was a big taboo to not be on good terms with each other. Meng Hun was silent for a while and asked, Is this what my lord wants? Feng Zhen smiled. No, my lord. I'm just guessing. Meng Hun downed the wine in the goblet and snorted. Meng Xueqi has been with my lord for a while. Have I ever made things difficult for him? Feng Zhen cupped his hands and said respectfully, Officer Meng is broad-minded. You're thinking too much. I'll drink this as a punishment. Meng Hun raised his hand to stop him and said angrily, There's only one jar of good wine. How much do you want to drink? After the funeral, Meng Heng immediately changed out of his mourning clothes. He wore plain clothes with a plain white belt around his waist. That night, he went to look for Jiang Pengji.
I thought Cousin Heng would come looking for me earlier.
Chapter 1085.
Master. Meng Heng was about to bow, but Jiang Pengji stopped him.
There are no outsiders here. You don't have to call me Cousin Heng in private. Meng Heng shook his head and said sternly, etiquette cannot be ignored. Although Heng is the Lord's cousin, he cannot easily overstep his boundaries. No matter how good their relationship was, it could not withstand the slightest neglect and rudeness. Meng Heng did not want today's intimacy to become rudeness in the future. Jiang Pengji secretly rolled her eyes and sighed. Cousin Heng is good in every aspect, but he's too cautious. Meng Heng did not say anything. This cautiousness and politeness were deeply ingrained in his bones. It was not something that could be changed in a short time. If he hadn't been careful and meticulous, he probably wouldn't have lived to this age. Jiang Pengji grabbed a table and leaned half of her body on it. She asked casually, "What does Cousin Heng want to know?" Meng Heng was definitely not looking for him for official business. It was most likely related to the dungeon incident. "I'm very happy that Cousin Heng still chose to trust me." Jiang Pengji smiled. If Meng Heng was unhappy, he could ask Nie Sun, but he didn't. Instead,
he waited until Meng Zhan's funeral was over.
"Since Cousin Heng treats me with sincerity, I can't lie to you." Meng Heng sat upright, like a green bamboo that would not bend in the face of wind and rain. His tenacity and integrity were what Jiang Pengji admired. "Nie Qingyun. He's the Meng family patriarch's lost pearl in the vast ocean?" Meng Heng had already guessed that Nie Sun was related to him by blood, but he had not guessed that Nie Sun was his younger brother from the same mother. Jiang Pengji sighed. "It's a long story. I'm afraid that Cousin Heng doesn't know that Meng Liang isn't my aunt's child." "What?" Meng Heng widened his eyes in shock. Jiang Pengji said, "Back then, my aunt and Meng Zhan's concubine were pregnant at the same time. They gave birth to a son almost at the same time. Meng Zhan didn't want to mistreat the concubine's child, so he allowed the concubine to swap the concubine. The Shu aunt's real child was replaced by a concubine and died in less than 2 days. The maidservant buried the baby carelessly. Luckily, a passing maidservant dug it out and sold it to Zhongzhao." Meng Heng's clenched fists trembled uncontrollably. At that moment, he was almost speechless. Nie Sun. He's that child? No wonder. Meng Zhan, Meng Liang, and the concubine were like a family. However, Meng Heng had always wondered why his father let the concubine raise his second son. This was the crux of the problem. "I think, Shu aunt probably didn't want your situation in the Meng residence to become more difficult, so she didn't tell you these old matters." Jiang Pengji took a sip of the sake.
The bland taste of the wine spread in her mouth, carrying a tinge of bitterness.
"At first, I didn't recognize Nie Sun's identity. I just felt that his silhouette resembled someone, but I couldn't remember who that person was. After that, I heard that Nie Sun was very close to you and took good care of you. Nie Sun came to Dongqing to look for his family. Only then did I confirm his identity. He was the real Meng Liang." Meng Heng shook his head. "No, Nie Sun is Nie Sun. How can the name Meng Liang tarnish him?" Meng Heng could not remain calm after receiving too much information in such a short period of time. "My lord, you already knew of Nie Sun's identity. Then, did you also deliberately facilitate the dungeon incident?" Jiang Pengji smiled. "Cousin Heng, are you bitterly disappointed? Are you suspecting that I deliberately pushed you into a dead end?" Meng Heng shook his head weakly.
He looked listless, as if he had been drained of all his energy.
"My lord, you are highly skilled in martial arts. You were not far away at that time, but you were watching from the sidelines. It shows that you were confident." Meng Liang's sudden outburst was not something that could be controlled by an outsider. "I'm just not sure. Did you want me to kill Meng Liang in your plan?" Jiang Pengji frowned. "Let you kill him? What's the difference between that and crippling you myself?" Meng Heng was different from Nie Sun. If Meng Heng accidentally killed Meng Zhan, he might be depressed for the rest of his life. "My lord, you want to cripple Nie Sun? Cousin Heng, are you soft-hearted? Humans are not plants. How can we be emotionless?" Meng Heng did not deny it. He really had a good impression of Nye Soon. Nye Soon looked very similar to his mother, which made them feel closer. Meng Heng was surprised and happy to hear that Meng Liang was his biological brother. He could not bring himself to do it. Meng Heng's lips moved. His eyes were filled with complexity and struggle. Although they were not brothers, Meng Heng could not cripple Nye Soon as soon as they met. Jiang Pengji sneered. Nye Chengyun is not cousin Heng. His heart is much colder than you think. As a father, he gave birth to him but did not raise him. To him, Meng Zhan was not only not his father, but also his mortal enemy. He offered advice to Bogeo many times and made trouble for me many times. This incident in the dungeon can not only end the grudge between me and Meng Zhan, but it can also serve as a warning to Nye Soon. I have done this with a clear conscience. If I had to apologize, it would be cousin Heng. No matter how bad he is still your father. Was Nye Soon allowed to plot against her? But she was not allowed to? Moreover, Jiang Pengji's real purpose was to let Meng Zhan die with everlasting regret. Nye Soon was just a convenience. How could Meng Heng agree? What Meng Zhan had done was not just about personal grudges. It was about the country. It was enough to drag the entire Mengs into eternal damnation. Even if Meng Heng still had a trace of father-son relationship in his heart, he would not lose his head and plead for Meng Zhan. The Lord was willing to be honest with him. It was already a rare trust. Jiang Pengji did not force him. Meng Heng would think it through. After a while Meng Heng said, "Lord, what about the previous arrangements?" He had wanted to sow discord between Huang Song and Nye Soon. He wanted to use Nye Soon as a breakthrough point to split them from the inside and cause discord between them. Now that this had happened, of course it has to continue. But I am not a cold-hearted person. If cousin Heng is unwilling, I will not force you. Meng Heng shook his head. He did not bring up this matter to quit midway. It is most appropriate for Heng to handle this matter. The Lord has given Heng an important task, and Heng will repay it as a national hero. Meng Heng was not stupid. The struggle for hegemony was not a child's play. One careless move and he would lose everything. Feng Jin and Feng Ju parted ways because of this. What did he and Nye Soon count for? Meng Heng's side was solved, but Nye Soon's troubles had just begun. After that day in the dungeon, Feng Ju told Huang Song about his speculation. Huang Song was stunned. You mean, Cheng Yun is from the Mengs, and he is Meng Heng's younger brother? Why would he hide such an important matter from me? Most likely. It would be fine if Nye Soon was not in the know, but Yuan Xian had told Huang Song that Nye Soon called Meng Heng elder brother. Considering Nye Soon's reaction in the dungeon, Meng Heng obviously knew about it, but he did not want to make it public. What was his motive? Song is happy for Cheng Yun that he has found his family. Is there a need to hide it like this? The more he thought about it, the more Huang Song felt uncomfortable. Feng Ju said, "Lord, this matter is of great importance. Please make a conclusion after further investigation." Chapter 1086. The matter between Nye Soon and Meng Heng had been resolved smoothly, but only the people involved knew whether or not it was over. Huang Song still held a grudge. Who asked Nye Soon to deceive them first? Even though Huang Song did not show it clearly, Nye Soon was a shrewd person. He felt somewhat bitter in his heart. Nye Soon had mixed feelings as he watched Meng Heng visit him every few days. He had something to say, but he didn't know whether he should say it or not. Aren't you afraid that Lu Shi will suspect something? Nye Soon finally couldn't hold it in any longer and probed. If Heng distanced herself from you, Master would be suspicious. You and I have a clean relationship, so there's no need to hide it. It'll only make people gossip. Meng Heng let out a bitter laugh, as if he had his own difficulties. According to the logic of ordinary people, brothers who had finally reunited with each other should naturally be on good terms with each other. How could they not contact each other until death? Before they acknowledged each other, their relationship was already pretty good. Now that they were related by blood, there was no reason for them to drift apart. Nye Soon was at a loss for words. Meng Heng was like a piece of sticky candy that came to him of his own accord. He had not been able to get rid of him before, but now, he would stick to him even if he did. Right now, the most troublesome thing was not personal affairs, but the activity outside Zhangjiang Pass and Yumen Pass. After the Meng's manor was raided, the letters between Meng Zhan, the Nyes of Zhongzhou, and the Yis of Beiyuan were also exposed. Not only was the Mengs pushed to the teeth of the storm again, but the grim situation at the border was also on the table of Jiang Pengji and Huang Song. If the two of them fought, others would definitely take advantage of it. The best solution was for the two families to continue to form an alliance and help each other. Only then would the Zhongzhou Nye clan and the Beiyuan Yi clan not dare to act rashly. When Fengju visited Jiang Pengji on behalf of Huang Song, the audience in the streaming room exploded before she could. Xueqi, I've been following the live stream for so many years, but this is the first time I've felt so aggrieved. The streamer is the one who has been wronged. Not only did she not give her personal space to heal her wounds, but Huang Song shamelessly came up to her and wanted to form an alliance with her to fight against the enemy. Shenjia, I've been a bit depressed lately. Although I've gotten back some face from Meng Zhan, I'm still not happy. Fei, the streamer's ultimate move takes a long time to charge up. Mushroom soup hot pot. Calm down. This has happened a lot in history. Our boss Chao, because of his lust, played with Mrs. Zhou, the widow of Zhang Xiu's uncle, which led to Zhang Xiu's betrayal. His eldest son Chao Ong, nephew Chao Anmin, and General Dian Wei were all killed. What was the result? Didn't Boss Chao treat poison warrior Jia Su as his precious eyeball? Jia Su was the only one among Boss Chao's many advisors who died of old age. The grievances that the host has suffered are not even 1/10,000th of what Boss Chao has suffered, so it is not considered bitter. Lao Ciji Lianming, #PickNose1. The streamer wouldn't play the role of a widower who has been defeated by a general. As the audience chattered on, the topic of conversation began to stray to an unseemly degree. Jiang Pengji was calm and composed. She was not affected at all. Fengju looked at the big picture and hoped that the two families could let go of the past and defend the land of Dongqing together under the banner of righteousness. Naturally, she couldn't undermine him. Even if Huang Song hadn't mentioned it, Jiang Pengji would have suggested consolidating the alliance. Now that Huang Song took the initiative to bring it up, the effect was better. Fengju had a bad premonition that the lobbying this time was going too smoothly. He went back and passed the message to Huang Song. Huang Song also expressed that something was wrong. He kept pacing, almost making a hole in the ground. Lanting's temperament is, to put it nicely, serious. To put it bluntly, she's calculative and vengeful. After suffering such a big loss, the more generous she is and the more unfussy I am, the more uneasy I feel. I have a feeling that she's holding back some tricks. Huang Song felt uneasy, but according to the scouts' report, whether it was the 5,000 elites in Meng County or the army stationed at the border of Chenyan County, all of them were well behaved. Fengju thought so too. Jiang Pengji had left a deep shadow in their hearts when she was young. They couldn't help but overthink it. By the way, about Cheng Yun. Is he still close to Meng Hang? Fengju said. The two of them are friends. My lord, you can't listen to Yuan Sun's words and ruin the harmony between the civil and military officials. He didn't know what kind of temper Yuan Xian had. He kept his eyes on Nye Sun and refused to let go. No matter how loyal a person was, he couldn't stand such suspicion. The more Yuan Xian did this, the further Nye Sun would be pushed away. Thinking of this, Fengju felt some resentment towards Yuan Xian. He was a dignified general, but instead of thinking about killing the enemy and being loyal, he kept his eyes on such a small matter. His vision was too narrow. Huang Song responded vaguely, but only he knew if he took it in. Before Nye Sun's identity was exposed, Huang Song naturally believed him. No matter how much Yuan Xian talked, he never wavered. Ever since he found out that Nye Sun was deliberately deceiving him, Huang Song had a grudge. This grudge was very, very small, but it was a seed of suspicion. It took root fiercely. Yuan Xian snitched on him every now and then, which became the best nourishment for the seed to germinate. One day, it would grow into a towering tree. Seeing Nye Sun go to the big pit and never return, Wei Xi felt even more sorry for Yang Si. What was the connection between the two? In his previous life, Yang Si had been harmed by his lord by sowing discord. In the end, he had no choice but to be recruited by his lord. Speaking of Jing Rong, there should be good news coming from his side soon, right? Jiang Pengji had been in Meng County for some time. No matter how good it was still Huang Song's territory. It was needless to say that it was dangerous. She refused to move because she wanted to cover for Yang Si and Yan Yan. In ancient times, the transmission of information was very slow. Even if it was 800 miles at top speed, it still needed a certain amount of time. Chenzhou and Songzhou were separated by the rapid Song River. As long as they seized this important route in advance, the news would be pushed back again and again. When Huang Song received the news that Yang Si and Yan Yan had brought troops to Chenzhou, the situation was basically settled. She wanted to see who would be the one to suffer in silence in the end. Meng Zhan bore the crime of regicide and cleared the way for Huang Song. In the end, the person who would reap the rewards would be her, Jiang Pengji. Wei Ci came back to his senses and said, "Looking at the time, it's almost time." Jiang Pengji took a sip of fragrant tea and smiled like a fox.
Jing Rong will not let me down.
Wei Ci stayed at the side with mixed feelings. In both previous lives, Yang Si had not been able to get rid of his lord. It was clearly fate. Time is still too short. Wei Ci could not help but say something good for Yang Si. If Yang Si did not achieve the expected goal, he hoped that Jiang Pengji would be lenient. After all, Yang Si was already pitiful enough. He had been unexpectedly sent to Hu County by Jiang Pengji for several years. He had been dealing with Su Pei's elite, Han Yu, all year round. Now he had to lead troops from thousands of miles away to help Chenzhou. Not only did he have to be fast and efficient, but he also had to do it quietly so that the news would not reach Huang Song's ears in advance. He had not lived an easy life in this life. He never expected that before Yang Si's news came, the messenger from the Nie family of Zhongzhou had already arrived. Fortunately, the messenger from the Yi family of Beiyuan is still on the way. Otherwise, when the two families meet, it will be a bloody battlefield. Meng Zhan had asked for it. He had promised Songzhou to 2 big shots, and then he had given Songzhou to a third person. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.